I would like to extend a warm welcome to all members of the Planning Committee, officers and members of the public in attendance at today's meeting. I am Councillor Christine Ward, Chairman of the Planning Committee. I would now like to hand over to Democratic Services to read the housekeeping notes.
Please note this meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's website and on YouTube. It will remain available for a minimum of 12 months. Please can those in attendance use your microphone when speaking and switch it off when you've finished. Please turn any mobile devices and laptops to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. If the fire alarm rings, please can everyone leave the room immediately and use the nearest fire exit. Do not use the lift. Please go to the fire assembly point located at the bottom of the car park by the garages.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies?
We've received apologies from Councillors Brand and Rickman.
Thank you. Can we confirm the minutes, please, for the 15th of January? All agree? Thank you. And now can I have declarations of interest? Ladowd.
Thank you. I have three for clarity I'll mention. There's 24/11019, 47 High Street, Hythe, which is in my ward. 24/11023, the same premises. But there's also 24/10689. And just for clarity, I do not attend parish planning meetings, and I haven't involved myself with any of these applications prior to today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. I sit on Hythe and Didden Parish Council, but not on the Planning Committee. And the same three applications that Councillor Dowd referred to, I have not expressed any interest or comment at all previously.
Hawkins, did you have your hand up? No. Councillor Hart.
Application 241196 and application 24108161. The former Fawley Power Station land. It's in my ward. I'm not on the planning committee. I haven't commented yet. And also, Arad, less than half a mile. My farm's less than half a mile from the property. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go on to the first application, which is SS8, land at Hordle Lane, Hordle. This is on page 5 of the agenda, application 23/10661. We have speakers. We have here Mr. Jamie Hanna, who's going to speak. He's the agent, and he will have 3 minutes. But he's supported by Mr. Jonathan, is it Quarrell? Okay. And Steve Jenkins on transport, if you need to ask any questions. We also have officers from Hampshire County Council, Nick Gammer from Highways, Hampshire. And we have Councillor Colin Sambrook and Carol Rook, but one of you is going to speak, so you will have 3 minutes, and you're from Hordle Parish Council. Thank you. So we'll go ahead with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just have a few items for a verbal update. Firstly, we've had one additional letter from the local community setting out comments on the Hordle Village Design Statement and the age of the New Forest District Council local plan. Secondly, condition 5, which is for parameter plans, we are now going to add the design and access statement into the list of plans and documents within that condition. Condition 17, we will amend slightly to provide some additional clarity to make sure that the gates that are necessary within that, it's a landscaping condition for the proposed ANRG are included within the condition. And also within the heads of terms attached to the recommendation, we will be including an additional phrase, delivery of highway works to account for any highway works that need to be secured through a section 106 or a section 278. So moving on to the presentation, application 23/10661 land at Hordle Lane, Hordle, which is local plan allocation site SS8. So as you can see from the red line plan, the application site is located essentially in the centre of Hordle, either side of Hordle Lane. Hordle itself, which I'm sure you'll all be aware, is a settlement that is essentially comprises two sections, east and west of this particular allocation site and application site in front of us. The size of the site is approximately 12 hectares, and as you can see, it has a distinctive irregular shape, this application site. And there's the local context in greater detail. Clearly, you can see that Hordle Lane bisects the application site, and the top of the application site, where the public right-of-way is Everton Road, and its site goes down to the boundary of Sky End Lane to the south, Vicarage Lane to the east, and the protected woodland on the western side, just to the east of the Park Home site. And there you can see there in the aerial photograph as well its location within Hordle, including the open countryside to the south of the application site. This is our local plan concept master plan, which supports the policy SS8 in our local plan. You can see there that the intention of the authority when the local plan was adopted was to have two broad areas of housing, one to the west of Hordle Lane, which would be bounded by potential public open space, with the centre of the site comprising a mix of different public open space types, including the ANRG, and then a second larger area of housing to the south of the allocation site. That, just for clarity, is outside consideration here and may be subject to subsequent applications. The concept master plan usefully sets out indicative areas of access. So you can see that into this application site, we have an indicative primary access coming off Hordle Lane. And it's also indicated a potential primary access coming off Nursery Close. But you can also see as well there with the, I think they're purple lines, the proposed non-vehicular accesses as well, going through the site, connecting on a broad north-south axis. There is an existing public right-of-way, which we'll come back to later, to the north of the site, which connects through to Stopples Lane from Everton Road. And you can also see there indicated as well the extent of existing vegetation across the application site, particularly in the west there with its protected woodland. So the proposed development, the proposal is a hybrid application for the following: outline planning application for development on the land to the west of Hordle Lane, up to 155 dwellings, Class C3 use, including affordable housing, public open space and associated landscaping, surface water drainage and infrastructure works, with all matters reserved except for the vehicular access into Hordle Lane. The proposed housing comprises 60% market dwellings, so that would be up to 93 dwellings, and up to 40%, up to 62 affordable dwellings. Full application on the land to the east of Hordle Lane for public open space comprising alternative natural recreational green space, pedestrian and vehicular access, allotments, surface water drainage and car parking. The application is supported by 3 parameter plans, arguably the key one is the land use parameter plan. The proposed residential development within this scheme, so up to 155 units, would be located entirely to the west of Wardle Lane in line with this parameter plan. So as you can see, this is broadly in accordance with the concept master plan, which sought to locate housing in this area. And you can see as well that the existing vegetation to the west of the housing would be retained and be formed as part of the proposed public open space offer. To the east of Wardle Lane, you have the proposed A&RG, which supports the development, and that is 3.26 hectares of A&RG, which would be publicly accessible open space. And to the south of that would be an area of allotments as indicated by the purple shaded area. You also note as well in the land use parameter plan the main points of access, which is the yellow arrow on Wardle Lane, and also the pedestrian crossings, of which there are two on Wardle Lane, one closely sited to the vehicular access, and then one closely sited to the south of Wardle Lane at the edge of the housing scheme. There are also accesses indicated there from Sydney Street, which is to the southwest of the application site off of Stokels Lane. And the intention there is to form a pedestrian route through to the housing scheme. And also at the north of the parameter plan, you can see two arrows there which would provide a pedestrian cycle connection through to the existing public right-of-way, which is accessed off Everton Road. There's also a last potential access there off of from the scheme into Nursery Close, which would be pedestrian cycle access only, not vehicular. There's two shaded areas on the parameter plan that aren't on this particular key. And they include the orange area, which is proposed location for a younger children's playground, and also a red area parallel to Wardle Lane, which has been agreed with the applicants to provide in due course additional parking for the church and the associated hall and their patrons. Moving on to the green infrastructure parameter plan, this sets out obviously the extent of open space and vegetation within the site, which is extensive. The public open space, which would be informal open space adjacent to the housing, includes, as mentioned, play. It also include drainage features, pedestrian and cycle links, including that down to Sydney Street, landscaping, and the retained vegetation. Majority of vegetation is proposed to be retained and managed over the long term. On the eastern side of Wardle Lane, we have the alternative natural recreational green space, A&RG, and that will include landscaping and pedestrian access and retained vegetation. I'll come back to that later. And also the allotments to the south of the A&RG. Third parameter plan is the building heights parameter plan, which subdivides the proposed building housing area into two. The periphery of that area would be up to two-storey development, and the centre of the site would be up to 2.5-storey development up to 11 metres ridgeline height. This is essentially officers are minded, as set out in the committee report, that this is in line with the specific criteria within the sporting policy for SS8, which sought some higher density development within the centre of this building parcel. Okay, so turning to the local area and Wardle Lane, this is looking south from the just south of the point of the proposed access. And you can see the current character of Wardle Lane is that it's well vegetated on its boundaries with mature trees and hedgerows, and that the road itself does not include any pavements nor any particular road markings at this point. So it very much does have the character of a lane. And this is the junction you can see here at Stopples Lane, Wardle Lane, Sky End Lane. This is at the southern apex of the application site where the allotments would be located, and south of this would be open countryside. So this is looking northwards along Wardle Lane towards, as you can see on the overhead plan on the right-hand side, looking towards entering Wardle Village and towards the proposed access on the left-hand side of the through the central photograph. And the area of the proposed vehicular access is currently subject to vegetation, and we will have to remove a tree or two to facilitate that access. But that access, as you'll note, is in line with that indicated within the concept master plan, which we set out just now. This is the housing site vehicular access arrangement. This is the detailed engineering, or part of the detailed engineering drawing that has been agreed with Hampshire County Council Highways. So you can see it's a standard vehicular access. There would be pavements on either side of that particular access. That's indicated in the brown shading. You can see on the southern side of the access there would be a crossing, and that crossing would facilitate access from the scheme into the proposed ANRG open space. The access, pedestrian access to the north would then form the first part of the proposed new pedestrian access, which seeks to provide a connection through to the facilities north of the application site, namely the school and the church, and then up to Everton Road. North of the access, or proposed vehicular access into the site, the applicants have agreed with County Highways for a build-out element within Wardle Lane, and it would be located at this area here, which you can see in the photograph on the right. There is an existing path there, which you can see with a couple of low barriers, and it would connect into that as well. And this build out would provide traffic calming in this particular part of Wardle Lane, and also the brown shaded area would be a continuation of the footpath. And that pedestrian route would continue over the existing entrance into the adjacent residential area, Nursery Close, and then provide a new footpath through to the existing path, which you can see on the right-hand photograph there. So where that in the left-hand photograph, you can see it's currently mostly overgrown, so that would be turned into a proper footpath parallel to the road. We would have that connection through to the existing route into Nursery Close, which you can see in the central photograph by the bus stop. So the intention there is to provide an upgrade to the pedestrian routes. And certainly that would include improvements in surfacing away from this at the moment, which partly comprises loose gravel, as can be seen. Okay, as part of the need for highway safety, we have a need to regularise the parking outside the parish church, and the solution that has been agreed with the applicants and the county highways is to form 4 parallel spaces as set out in the diagram or the portion of the engineering plan on the left-hand side there. So there will be 4 2 by 6 metre parallel parking bays. And there'll also be a 1.2 metre wide hard standing behind the bays to facilitate safe access into any parked vehicles. At the moment, the parking outside the church is not formalised, and there would be a reduction, I believe, in about three spaces generally, where people, in that particular instance, the car was parked parallel in line with the suggested solution, but sometimes people park face on towards the hedging. And the last part of the highways element is just to indicate the public right of way north of the site. So this is an existing public right of way which this scheme would connect into, and that provides a link from Everton Road through to the western portion of Ordle, including where the village shops are. So there is a small contribution sought towards the upgrade of that public right of way. At the area you can see between the application site and Everton Road, where it's currently unmade loose gravel, so it will seek to improve that with a proper tarmac surface as per the rest of that route. So within the housing area itself, the land is essentially agricultural at the moment, and the topography of the site is generally flat. You can particularly see that close to Hordle Lane. So this was a photograph taken from the direction of the red arrow in the plan on the right, looking towards the existing housing at Nursery Close. This is a view looking across towards Hordle Lane. You can see the mature trees there, obviously on the Hordle Lane, and then beyond that, existing properties on Vicarage Lane. And then the view to the north and northwest. You can see there, although taken in the winter, you can see the view across the protected Sink woodland. So clearly in summer, the views of the Woodside Parkhome area to the west, or woodlands I should say, Parkhome area to the west would be more filtered. So that photograph was taken at, I suppose, during the winter to show that any views, even at that time of year, of the Parkhome are essentially filtered by the protected woodland and its vegetation. And then looking south through the centre of the housing area, there's a significant amount of vegetation on the southern boundary of that area there, but you can see filtered views of some of the properties. And I believe that the property in the centre of the photograph there is within Sydney Street. There are also 2 larger properties as well south of the immediately south of the housing area. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, this is at least for the housing area outlined. So the application will need to be supported by a subsequent reserved matters application, which will address the matters of scale, appearance, layout and landscaping for that area west of Hordle Lane. However, I thought it might be useful to set out a committee the illustrative master plan that the applicants have provided, and this is public information, it's on our website. So essentially we are looking at the housing development comprising 8 or 9 separate parcels of development And in line with the land use parameter plan, the intention is that the central parcels, which you can see in the plan on the left there, essentially to the left of Nursery Close, would be where the high density housing would be located. And then the housing in the 2 or 3 larger parcels to the south as you go along Wardle Lane would essentially be the lower density housing, which in reality is probably going to be sort of semi-detached and detached housing. And then on the right-hand side of the plan, you can see the illustrated master plans version of the ANRG open space. I'll come back to that in a moment. But this one is a indicative block plan. So just to reiterate, we're not seeking to look at layout and scale and the housing element, detailed design elements today, but I thought it would be useful for members to see the intentions of the applicants here. And this essentially follows both the preceding plan and the land use parameter plan is into the intention is that there would be a grading of density of development through the site, and the site would follow the need to provide public open space across at least the western boundary of the housing area. You also note that the housing is set back quite a way from the boundary with the trees on Wardle Lane, so to provide more filtered views as people travel across that. So they're not proposing to build up close to the boundary of Wardle Lane. They can be pushed back into the site with a degree of separation. Okay, we have a good design and access statement provided by the applicants, and that includes suggested traditional vernacular for the houses, and I think as officers would like to see that carried through into the reserved matters there. We think that's the most appropriate style for this part of Wardle, and these are some examples of what the applicants have provided elsewhere. I think that would be a good starting point for discussions on that reserved matters. So that's the broad intention, is to get a scheme with traditional architecture. Going back to the ANRG, I think it's fair to say that the land that the ANRG is sited upon has some advantages. It's flat, and it's open. It's got good surveillance, and I think having worked, the applicants have worked with officers both in the development management team and within the environmental design team to produce what we think is a good ANRG in terms of open spaces. It provides that necessary space for dog walkers, but I also think as well there's good areas there for youngsters to play in and provides suitable walks for those without children or dogs. You will note in the corner of the ANRG strategy plan, there's a broad rectangular area that's not included within that. It is included within the concept master plan indicated for ANRG, and there is potential for that particular land to come forward in conjunction with other schemes within the application, within the allocation site. So we don't have all of the ANRG, but as I said out earlier, this application is only part of the allocation site. So officers will be working, hopefully, to secure that as an extension to this applicant's ANRG in the future. Now, to the south of the ANRG, we have an area of allotments of 15 different plots. 10 of those plots replace some area of land indicated for allotments, which is included within the application site south of Nursery Close, and there are 5 additional plots on top of that. There's also a small area of parking, and that is proposed to be used for the allotment users, and that would comprise a new vehicular access off of Wardle Lane. The photograph on the right shows the existing 5-bar gate there. We'll be working with the applicants through the conditions to remove the 5-bar gate and improve that through the introduction of new hedgerows. And hopefully this will minimise any visual intrusion of the infrastructure associated with the allotments at that point. Moving on to flood risk and surface water drainage. We've agreed with Hampshire County Council colleagues as the lead local flood authority, a surface water drainage strategy within the housing area on the left. That will comprise a series of swales and basins that will eventually drain into the existing stream that goes through the middle of the protected woodland to the west in the area between this housing site and the Park Home area. And then on the right-hand side, we've got a surface water drainage scheme for the allotments area as well, and that will drain into the basins within the ANRG. We felt that that was necessary as the land of the allotments sited on. There has been some examples of ponding on there, can be damp, so it will need its own drainage scheme as well. Okay, so in summary, the proposal would provide 97% of the minimum quantum of housing identified in a local plan policy, SS8. That minimum quantum is 160, and we have up to 155 on the table here. And therefore, the proposal would make a significant contribution to the district's housing need. The development will deliver up to 62 affordable dwellings, depending on the final total number to be determined through a reserved matters application. And that will be across a range of tenures. That's social rent, affordable rent, and shared ownership. So the affordable housing offer that the applicants provided, or proposing to provide, is in line with our affordable housing policy and the tenure split that is set out within that. Given the proposed housing, the balance is clearly in favour of permission and will meet the priority of meeting housing needs set out in the recently adopted NFDC corporate plan. No substantive alternative evidence has been submitted in representation to set aside the views of statutory consultees. The proposal, subject to a Section 106 planning obligation and suitable conditions, will be acceptable in terms of highways, access, public right-of-way, flood risk, surface water drainage, and foul drainage. The representations from the Parish Council and local communities highways are fully noted, but in line with the representations from local highway authority, subject to a Section 106 planning obligation and suitable conditions, the proposal is suitably mitigated for development. The proposal, subject to a Section 106 planning obligation and suitable conditions, will be acceptable in terms of habitat mitigation and European designated nature conservation sites, trees, nitrate neutrality, biodiversity net gain, protected species and invasive species. The proposal, subject to a Section 106 planning obligation and suitable conditions, will also provide suitable public open space in the form of ANRG and allotments. Detailed design of the proposed public open space adjacent to the housing will be addressed in a subsequent reserved matters application as set out. The proposal, subject to suitable conditions, will not have a harmful impact on mineral extraction, air quality, noise and residential amenity. The proposal will include a substantial package of contributions of approximately 1.6 million towards local infrastructure and mitigation to be secured in a Section 106 planning obligation, and there will be significant further infrastructure funding which come forward through the community infrastructure levy. So the planning balance overall, given the no technical objections proposal, which coupled with the significant public benefits, including the delivery of needed market and affordable housing, the provision of substantial new public open space and sustainable development as set out in the report, the proposal was considered to be in line with local and national policy and guidance. As such, in accordance with paragraph 11D of the NPPF on the balance of all material considerations, with significant weight placed on substantial housing being brought forward, the proposal provides sustainable development in line with local plan policy STR1. Any identified harm does not equate to an identifiable level of adverse impact, whereby the impact would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the identified benefits that the application will bring, as set out in the report. And therefore, the recommendation is that delegated authority be given to the service manager for development management to reconsult Natural England on the attached appropriate assessment and to have regard to their advice, and to grant permission subject to the prior completion of an agreement pursuant to Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act to secure the following: affordable housing provision of 40% of the tenure split in line with local plan policy HDU2, 35% social rented, 35% affordable rented, 30% shared ownership, provision of allotments, car parking, management arrangements, including the future management arrangements with potential transfer to the parish council. Air quality monitoring contribution, delivery of the ANRG, public open space and on-site play, and including management and maintenance framework. Biodiversity net gain management and monitoring, district council monitoring charges as set out. Formal public open space contribution, non-infrastructure, habitat mitigation, access management and monitoring, habitat mitigation in the form of birds aware contribution, and a contribution towards off-site children's play, and the imposition of the conditions as set out in the committee report and any additional or amended conditions deemed necessary by the service manager for development management. And that is the end of the presentation.
Thank you very much for that very detailed presentation. We'll now go to the speakers. So first of all, we have Mr. James Hanna, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Dear members of the panel, my name is Jamie Hanna and I'm the agent for this application representing Bargate Homes. Also in attendance is Jonathan Quarrell from Bargate Homes and Steve Jenkins from iTransport, who are able to answer any queries related to the development background and transport matters. This application is recommended for approval by your officer, which reflects the proactive and cooperative discussions between Bargate Homes, your officers, other key stakeholders and residents. This application is being considered in the context of a high level of housing need in New Forest District, with an urgent need to deliver sites in the adopted plan. Since the plan's adoption, the government has published an updated version of the NPPF in December 2024, which has updated and resulted in an increase in housing need and will impact the council's published supply position in the future. Therefore, it is essential that highly deliverable sites such as this one can come forward. As members will be aware, the site represents one of the strategic sites for development in the district and is allocated under policy SS8 in the local plan. By allocating the site, the principle of development has been established and confirms that it is a suitable location for development. The policy confirms a series of master planning objectives together with a number of site-specific considerations which future development will be required to address. While detailed design is considered as part of a reserved matters application, we have submitted an illustrative master plan as outlined by Robert, which demonstrates how the application reflects these policy requirements and the principles established in the draft strategic sites master planning SPD. In addition, the proposals incorporate ANRG to mitigate recreational impacts, with this including additional public open space, habitat areas, natural landscapes, and a natural play area within the site for use by existing and future residents. There's an additional area proposed for the provision of allotments as well. Within the development, we've also included a new area of parking for use by the church. While not strictly required by consultees, we recognise that there are existing parking pressures on Hordle Lane, and this represents a token of goodwill from Bargate Homes in order to assist. The additional area of parking is located to the right of the main site access, with the illustrative master plan showing a pedestrian link through to Hordle Lane, meaning that there will be easy access for all users. Overall, the application complies with all relevant planning policies and will secure the delivery of a site which has been identified for housing. Given the benefits of the proposals and the officer's clear recommendation, we respectfully request that planning permission is granted for the proposed development. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee this morning.
Thank you very much. Now we have Mr. Philip Mullins. You have 3 minutes and he is objecting.
Thank you. I understand the parish council will speak to a range of issues which I affirm, but I want to speak to the primary matter that concerns the school and the church, which is congestion and safety on Hordle Lane, both during construction and upon completion. It's my view that the ongoing reality of people who have to walk in the lane to get to church and school in conflict with vehicular traffic generated by the development will represent an unacceptable impact on highway safety. The daily reality of life on Hordle Lane is that parents and church users are forced to park all along the lane, much further than has been acknowledged, well past the proposed point of access to the site, and then walk in the carriageway until they can access a pedestrian route at Nursery Close. A majority of these people are children and adults with limited mobility, and there's simply nowhere else for them to park. I note the parking area that's been recognised up at Woodcock Lane is fully utilised by school staff throughout the day. The situation is worst at peak times, but remains significant throughout the day. Construction of a smaller development has already caused the closure of the much wider Everton Road, so we must assume closure of Hordle Lane will be needed for an extended period, which will make it extraordinarily difficult to access the school or church. The proposed development will introduce hundreds of vehicles onto that stretch of lane, in addition to the vehicles that will be introduced into the vicinity by other development underway and in the future, all trying to navigate pedestrians in the road. This is unsafe and will obstruct drivers from the development. The proposals do not seem to make it possible for people to park alongside Hordle Lane at the point of the development and exit directly onto a pedestrian route. Instead, they will continue to have to walk in the path of vehicular traffic to access one of the proposed pedestrian crossing points. The proposed build-out, whilst it's a welcome traffic calming measure, will force this parking pressure further down the lane, again into the vicinity of the new development. And additionally, the reduction of parking in the bay by the church, which is more than has been acknowledged, there's at least 8 or 10 cars that park there every day, is needlessly restrictive and could have been proposed in a diagonal alignment, retaining more spaces. In fact, the church leadership would have loved to have been approached about this before the proposal was made to discuss whether our boundary hedge could be moved to allow the existing arrangement to be formalised safely without requiring any loss of parking, and we would still welcome this conversation. Formalising the bay alone will not achieve very much, however, in the absence of wider roadside parking restrictions mitigated by alternative provision to address the single lane effect of roadside parking. Wider restrictions and alternative parking was a need recognised by the Highways Report in 2022, and the situation has not changed. The new local transport plan affirms a move away from car use, but this does not change the fact that the school and church draw large numbers of visitors from outside the village, whilst many locals are not willing to walk down wooded pedestrian routes that are frequently wet and dark for much of the year. And the logic that says children should be put at risk in order to dissuade parents from driving cannot hold. So the safety implications of the ongoing heavy traffic on Hordle Lane must be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carol Rook, you have 3 minutes to speak on behalf of Hordle Parish Council. Thank you.
Hordle Parish Council objects to this planning application. We accept that the site will be developed. However, we have concerns about the current proposals. The key concern is highway safety, particularly about the proposed build-out in Hordle Lane. This lane is used as a car park by people coming to the school and church. Cars line up along it throughout the day, making it effectively single track. This plan will make the road impassable and will displace the parking issues to other areas in the immediate vicinity, including the roads in the new development. The council is highly disappointed that the proposed temporary construction access will mean that mature oak trees will be lost, thereby destroying important habitats and affecting the character of the village, as has happened on Bargate's SS9 site on Everton Road. We are also very concerned about the pedestrian crossing arrangements. Firstly, in regard to how the school children will cross from the development to the school. Will they walk all the way down to the junction with Everton Road, where the Lollipop Man is currently located? Secondly, the lack of a pedestrian access from Vicarage Lane into the ANRG, as recommended by NFDC's Open Spaces Officer, is a missed opportunity. It is unrealistic to expect residents from this part of the village to cross over 2 roads to access it. This is a wasted chance to connect the village, and most concerningly, it is hazardous. We welcome the allotments, but consider their location to be poor. They are at the gateway to the village, and the plot is often waterlogged and shady, far from ideal growing conditions. In addition, the isolated position of the car park will mean a lack of informal oversight, leading to concerns for vandalism, theft, county lines, and other antisocial activities. Due to the high number of houses proposed, the local infrastructure will be under intense strain, from the drainage and sewage system through to the road network. The A337 and Ashley Lane will have cars and construction traffic, not just from this development, but also the many other strategic sites in the area. We request that improvements are made to the junction of Hordle Lane, Woodcock Lane and Everton Road, along with a crossing point on Ashley Lane by the pharmacy and play park. Hordle Parish Council urges the committee to ask Hampshire Highways to review the traffic issues before the application proceeds any further, and that this application in its current form is refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much, speakers. And just to remind members before they start asking questions, we do have Nick Gammer here from Hampshire Highways on the end. Thank you. So if you'd like to go ahead with questions for officers or our speakers, please. Councillor Crizell.
Could I ask the agent how many meetings have you had with the council, the local council? Have you had any meetings?
Yes, we have had several meetings. I think, Johnny, you probably have a better reflection of that, being longer.
I don't know exactly how many, but there has been plenty. We've gone through pre-app process. We've had meetings regarding design, landscape, ANRG. We've had meetings with highways and the council as well. So there's been many meetings that we've had regarding this application.
Sorry, could I just ask the councillor, did you feel comfortable with those meetings? Obviously, you've still got lots of questions.
Yes, we were comfortable with the meetings, but we did constantly raise these same issues, and we still feel that they haven't been sufficiently addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dowd.
Thank you. Can I first of all ask about the flood risk? In some of the site is flood zone 1. Most of the site is described as being of low risk, but there's no quantification of the bit that is prone to flooding. Is it high risk? Is it medium risk? And are the mitigations sufficient? Because we know this is a common issue with developments where mitigations are not up to task. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes, we are comfortable with both the flood risk and the mitigation that has been proposed. We've consulted with the Environment Agency, and we've also consulted Hampshire County Council in their capacity as lead local flood authority, and they have a specific responsibility to review surface water drainage matters. They provided us with support for the surface water drainage solution for both the housing area west of Hordle Lane and for, excuse me, the public open space east of Hordle Lane. You mentioned, Councillor Dowd, flood zone 1, and that is correct. And flood zone 1 is identified as the area of least flood risk, but that relates to fluvial flood risk, which is watercourses. There is one watercourse within the application site, and that is with it, as I mentioned in the presentation, within the woodland on the western boundary of the application site, west of the housing, where there's an existing stream that's in the land between the proposed housing and the park home area. So the intention is it would drain in essentially the surface water drainage from the housing area would drain into that existing stream, and that has the support of county colleagues.
Okay, I've got a second question. I'm a little bit confused with the ecological data saying there's a net loss overall, and so my understanding is that there will be mitigations elsewhere, not actually on the site, for biodiversity net loss. Because my understanding is we look to have a net gain in new developments. Have I got that right?
Yes, to an extent. We are looking for a mixed package of ecological mitigation with specific regard to biodiversity net gain. The applicants have come in slightly below the 10% uplift, so that will be bridged by the purchase of off-site credits. However, I do have to point out that in this instance, the application was submitted before the BNG target of 10% was made mandatory for major development. So notwithstanding that, I'm in view of myself and our in-house ecologists, with the view that the applicants have worked very positively with us to find a suitable solution in terms of BNG.
Thank you.
Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a couple of questions. It was a very comprehensive and detailed presentation, by the way. I know it's only outline planning permission, but this is quite a large development, and there could be in excess of 300 cars on it. Looking at the outline plan, all the houses by the design seems to have frontages close to the road. And I wonder where the cars are going to be parked if they have that design. Because looking at the overall plan, I'm looking at it now, it doesn't, there's lots of road space, but it doesn't show parking per se. That's the first question. And if I do the second question, because that's the highways, are you comfortable that the infrastructure around the site, particularly around Wardle Lane, is sufficient to take this exit? It's considerably extra large amount of traffic that will be going to from on the site on a regular basis. I know there'll be a lot of construction traffic, but this is going to probably a minimum, looking at these properties, of 300 vehicles. Every house has at least 2 cars at the moment. And I just wondered if we're satisfied that the infrastructure around that is significant. Thank you.
Can we get back into the correct planning application, please? Thank you.
Councillor Wade, the first part of your question, you mentioned parking. As I set out in the presentation, the illustrative layouts are purely that at the moment. We're not looking to determine that at the moment. So it may be during both the reserve matters application, determination of that, if it were to get consent, this outline, and any pre-apps that the applicants had with officers, we will need to review all of the parking within that proposed housing area. You'll know that we've got our own NFDC parking standards, and generally officers look to abide with those standards in terms of the quantity of parking spaces attached to any particular dwelling based on their size. A final parking design solution will need to be found, and I have to say, based on experience of other similar applications elsewhere, including other authorities, parking can sometimes be the trickiest design solution to overcome, possibly more so than the houses themselves. So I hear what you're saying in terms of parking, and it may well be that to find an acceptable parking solution, we may have less than 155 dwellings, and hence the application was up to 155. It's not 155, and if the applicants have to reduce that to get an acceptable quantum of parking, but also balance that with a suitable design, then that may well arise. And then in terms of the second part of your question, I would outline, refer to the committee report that our county highways colleagues sitting next to me have found the quantum of vehicle movements coming out of the scheme to be acceptable, to have an acceptable impact on the local highway network. Nick, would you like to add anything to that?
Thanks, Councillor Wade. The traffic generation has been assessed, and then the distribution of that traffic on the local network has been looked at and agreed, and then the junctions in the local area have been modelled. So there's been quite a thorough assessment, and we're happy that there won't be certainly any severe impact on the highway network.
On the first question, thank you for the answer. I take that on board. But that then could affect the number of affordable houses that are on the site if the overall number has to be reduced to deal with parking. Is that not correct?
In a way, yes. In the presentation, I put up to 63 affordable units. So yes, you would have a pro rata reduction. So, for example, if you were to reduce it by 10 units, we would seek a loss of 6 market and 4 affordable, so that there'd be a proportionate balance, not just lose affordable units.
Does anybody, Councillor Richard?
Could you go back to slide 25? It shows the allotments, please. Oh. Yeah, so as pointed out by the parish council, the allotments are right next to some trees which are on the southern border. So those allotments along that southeast edge are going to be quite shady, which doesn't seem ideal. But there's all this ANRG next to it. So would there be an opportunity to sort of at a later date to kind of rejig it a bit? Because it seems like there would be a opportunity to put the allotments in a slightly more sensible place, whereas the bit where the trees is ideal for ANRG, I'd have thought. So is that something that would be fixed at this stage, or could it be slightly changed later when you actually go on site and have a look at where you really want your allotments?
The allotments would be fixed as what is set out in the parameter plan that was shown at the earlier part of the presentation. I hear what the parish is saying about it's not an ideal location for allotments, but then it rarely is, because if it was a better position, the land would possibly be used for other uses. Within this wider area of open space to the east of Fordhall Lane, there is a covenant on this particular land, and that's actually referenced in our local plan on paragraph 100, paragraph 9.100, sorry, on page 136. So there is restrictions on that land where things can go. So what the applicants have agreed with the landholders, given that covenant, is to have the ANRG, the top portion of that public open space, and have the allotments to the south. For example, there's no proposed children's play equipment within the ANRG, which we've had in other ANRGs, and that's part of that restricted covenant that we've acknowledged within the supporting text in our local plan. So the outcome of that is that it's agreed that the allotments will be located towards the south.
Councillor Woods.
Can I ask the developer his view of the missed opportunity of the pathway to Vicarage Road? Was that discussed in the meetings?
Yes, we've had discussion on that with New Forest and Hampshire. I think there's obviously an element of, yes, whilst it might open it up to the wider population, there's also an element of you're then putting pedestrians onto an uncontrolled road, and then there's the issues around everything that's been discussed now about people walking along Fordhall Lane. So in discussion with those officers, it was deemed that it wasn't something that we wanted to provide within the application because of those reasons. I think, as Robert's outlined, there is a lot of connectivity to the site and the scheme. And with the future area of ANRG, there's potentially an opportunity to review it at that stage. But within this application, it was just determined to present it as it's shown.
So you're saying that is something that might well be reviewed at a later stage?
Yeah, I mean, us as Bargate wouldn't be involved in any future application because we don't control the other housing elements to the south. But there is contracts that we're involved in. That's where, should it become future ANRG, we essentially hand that land over, and then it'd be for those applicants to decide on access. And there's obviously an opportunity to review that. But obviously, as part of this scheme, we're not looking to provide it. But I think, as Robert noted, there is 2 future connections, one into that portion of retained land, and then also one on the eastern boundary as well, so that future residents can access that when that future application comes in.
Thank you.
Councillor Sleep.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a question, if I may, to the officer. Application 22-10577, the development comprising the site, was withdrawn on the 1st of December 2022. Can you remind me why that was withdrawn?
I'm happy to remind you, Councillor Sleep, although I would like to point out I wasn't working at New Forest at that time and didn't join until April 23. One of my colleagues was the case officer for that application with these applicants, and my understanding is that it was withdrawn because at that time they couldn't find a suitable ANRG solution with our own officers and possibly Natural England as well. So maybe Jonathan from the developers may be able to elaborate on that as well.
Okay, if I could follow on from that. Obviously, we've got a tremendous amount of work done by the parish on this, which demonstrates their concern on all of this. And one of your statements was that the parish comments have been fully noted. I notice we've got highways here, which is an amazing event for us because all these plans that we look at, we've always got problems with access roads, small street, little lanes. It's a nightmare forever when we look, but we always get highways say to us in the comments, it's okay, we've checked it. So we pass it because we have to take their words for it. Now, obviously, we've got a really strong support from the parish to actually ask it. So I just want to be reassured from you that those comments that they had, you've had a lot of dealings with them, so you think we fully noted all the concerns that have been brought forward during this time. And if not, will they be fully developed further on the next section of planning for the housing?
Yep. Both myself and everybody, Mark and everybody in his team, is always happy to meet the parishes if they approach us. I don't believe that that's specifically happened in this application, although I've had various conversations with the parish clerk, who isn't here today, and that was the last conversation I had was for over an hour before Christmas. In terms of noting the parish comments specifically on highways, these have been acknowledged by my colleagues from County Highways and taken into account in their professional opinion, which has been set out.
Thank you very much.
Are there any more questions? Councillor Riley.
Yeah, it says in here, the parish council will only accept the management of the allotments if they were transferred to the parish in perpetuity. Is that a possibility, or could that happen?
Yeah, the current intention is to open up a dialogue post this committee with the parish to see if they wish to take on in perpetuity stewardship of those allotments. That ball is in their court as to whether or not they wish to do it. If those allotments weren't taken on by the parish, then they would be incorporated within the management company, which will manage the other open spaces within the whole application site. So, for example, we've got the ANRG to the north of it, and then we've got the other public open space. They'll be subject to a management company regime, as we've done on I think most of the other strategic site allocations. But we will quite happily discuss that with the parish to see if they wish to take it on or not. Essentially, it's their choice, but the offer's there if they want it.
Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yes, my question will be to the developer. These houses that you are intending to build, hopefully they're built in the scheme that all the energy that goes to these houses will be green.
So obviously there's been a change in building regulations anyway, with a view to future home standards and taking away gas from property. So we are embracing that now. So the other scheme in Hordle is being delivered with air source heat pumps. This would be the same. We as a company, and this is beyond the regulations, are going to deliver at least 2 solar panels to each property. Where possible, more if we can. So obviously larger 4 beds where they've got bigger roofs, we'll try and deliver more than the 2 panels. So that obviously boosts sort of the energy production. All the properties will have electric vehicle charging. We've changed our wall cavity thickness from 300mm to 350mm, so there's additional insulation that can be undertaken. So a lot of these measures are coming forward in the future, but we've decided to start them now so that we can make sure that our houses are as green as possible. Recently, we have signed up to the Future Homes Hub, Homes for Nature as well. So that will be, there's measures within that for bird boxes, bee bricks, hedgehog highways and things like that. So we do truly see this as a very sustainable scheme, and it's something that we're very keen on to deliver, not just this scheme, but across all our sites that we deliver in Hampshire as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no more questions, we'll go into debate. Now into debate. Councillor Hawkins.
My view on this scheme is the same view as the parish council, and I'd like to commend the parish council on the tremendous amount of work that they've done in this area. They've not sort of camped out and been NIMBYs. They've gone about it in a real chronological way and looked at the problems that they have in Hordle and seen whether this new estate would give them any more. And if it's going to give them any more, can we try and mitigate that by putting the Ed pathway here and a little link here? But that hasn't happened. We've had a lot of deaf ears to the fact that at the moment we have tremendous traffic problems around the church and around when the school gets dropped off and picked up. You just can't park there, and they're parked all the way down the road. And Hordle Lane will become a footpath. You're only going to get one set of traffic going up and one coming down. It's going to be total chaos. And then put in with that is the vehicles that are needed to bring in stuff to build the houses. Then it's going to be absolutely murder. And I think there's not been enough attention to this particular problem. And if you think that you're going to do away with cars, get out of cuckoo land, because it's not going to happen. People aren't going to, we'll give up our car and we'll walk. No, that doesn't work. And when you see most of the schools around the area, how many cars, you've got one child, mummy or daddy drops the one child off, and there's cars all down the road, it's just blocked off. So, this is going to be really exaggerated by the more 155 odd dwellings, plus everybody living there, and the ages of the children. Wow, it's not, the plan's not there. And we need to have more pathways for safeties for the children and parents. And we need the roads more linkways into the roads. You've got one linkway into the main road and into the site. I mean, that's crazy, absolute crazy. So I can't really support this, unfortunately, because, you know, everything else seems to be tied up quite nicely. You've got very nice sort of play areas for the kiddies and adults to walk in. And the way it's been laid out actually on the building site is quite good. But it's what it's going to do to the area. It's going to become worse than London. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Know your concerns. I think there's still a lot of education that's got to go on with regards to taking children to school and dropping them off in cars, especially when they're so local to the school. And that needs to come from teachers and parents. Councillor Dowd.
Yes, I am. There are every application has its issues, and I think this is not no different from a lot. There are a few points that I've been really quite confused about here, and I think one of the biggest ones is something I couldn't ask a question about it today because it's to do with the higher authority. I can't understand how they're not increasing pupil places at the village school, expecting 2 other village schools to absorb pupils from the new development, where people are going to be driving to those schools should their children need to be educated there. It makes sense to me if the idea is that they're in favour of people walking to school, then you would increase the spaces in that village school and increase the resources at that village school to accommodate those pupils, encouraging people living locally to walk their children to school there. So, you know, they're saying we want this to happen in one breath, and in the other breath they're saying, well, we're spreading the mitigation across 3 schools, 2 of which are not in the village. So that fries my brain a little bit, that bit. I don't understand that one. I absolutely agree with my colleague here that a lot of the application on the face of it looks very attractive. It looks very well thought out. There are issues, but on balance, I would say that I'm tilted in favour, but I do have concerns about habitat mitigation, biodiversity, and I do have serious concerns that we can't address about why they're not putting the funding into the village school for those children that will come into the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Question obviously for Hampshire education. It's not something we can go into today. Sorry. Do you want to say something? Okay. I'll let legal say something about that.
Just to address Councillor Dowd's point, the second consultation response from the Education Authority says, to hopefully clarify our thinking for the education contributions, it is expected that those children moving into Hordle developments would be able to go to Hordle Primary School. There is just enough capacity at the school to accommodate the future catchment area. What that would likely mean, however, is that the school would no longer be able to accommodate any of the out of catchment children it currently does. So, in other words, the children generated by this development will go to Hordle School, but some children who lived outside the village that would previously have come to the school won't.
Thank you for that clarification.
Councillor Sleep.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to compliment the parish on the amount of work they've done in this. It does help us when we can actually look at both sides to all the arguments that are presented. I'm reassured personally that from listening to what the agent has said and from listening to our officers that there's still a conversation going on here, and we've got this first phase that we're looking at, and I'm reassured that hopefully the parish have got a second bite at any of their concerns when it comes to later on issues as they develop. So I'm happy about the situation I'm reassured that we've got this feedback.
Thank you. Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. We can talk a lot about traffic, but the problem is the New Forest doesn't have any decent public transport, so we have to drive cars. And that's not going to change anytime soon. That is the way it is. We have a problem, we don't build enough houses. And we've got to build even more from the government. Our officers, both from highways and from our own planning department, have told us it's acceptable to pass. Having said that, there is no planning reason why we're going to, and I totally understand the issues raised by the parish council, and I really do feel sympathetic, because you rightly are protecting your area, and you're looking at all the, it's come on purpose, all the things that will make it worse. And I take the point by my colleague, Councillor Hawkins and Councillor Dowd at issues. But the way forward in this is to try and work with the developer to mitigate the problems and get proper solutions that fit in with the community. Because we have to build the houses, and there's no planning reason why we can't pass it. It is better to establish that rapport, work together to get a really good solution for the area. Because the development, provided you have enough parking, that is, and we keep the affordable housing, I just make that point, provided that is in place, it will be a good development. It will tick a number of boxes that we have to tick because we need to build more houses, but we get a solution that is consensual. And I think that's the way we've got to look at these things going forward, working together with the local community. And there's a bit of give and take on both sides to get a development that will work not just for the residents who are going to live in it, but for the residents to live around it. And there is the potential with this development, if there's a will on both sides to do that. So I will support it, Chairman.
Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with the site development itself. And I would like to commend the parish council on all the hard work they've done. And there's affordable housing on there, there's part ownership housing, there's a good selection of housing on there. But the biggest problem I've got with this site is the traffic in Hordle Lane. It looks really unpredictable what is going to happen there in the future. So I would support the application, but I would be very concerned about the volume of traffic that will be there. I mean, it's hindsight, really, we don't know, but that would be my biggest concern, would be the traffic.
Does anybody else have anything to say? Councillor Crisell.
I just feel like I'm on Groundhog Day, because every time we have a planning application, we come up against the same problems. We've already accepted the fact that the house is going to be built there. We already knew that there was no roads that were going to support it. There's not enough parking, etc. And it's the same everything that comes up through here to be planned. So I think the actual plan is good. It seems like they've spent years discussing it. I'm not competent enough to argue about the ifs, ands and buts. It hits all the criteria. So I would like to propose to be accepted.
Whether I had that on. So that was Councillor Crisell proposed that and Councillor Wade seconded it. If we finish the debate, we'll go back to the speakers. So we'll go back firstly to Mr. James. Oh, God, I need my glasses. James Hanna, you have 1 minute to respond.
No further comments to add other than thank you for the discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Philip Mullins, you have 1 minute to respond.
Thank you for those who've acknowledged the significant traffic concerns. I'm also concerned to hear that apparently no approach has been made for a conversation with Highways, because I understand that several members of our community, including representatives of the school and the church, have attempted to have that conversation without success. Perhaps the means for doing so wasn't clear, but it might explain why there seems to be such a disparity between the lived reality on the ground. I walk that road every day, and it is effectively single lane all the way down the length past the side of the development. So that is an issue that needs to be addressed. I'm heartened by the suggestion that a conversation can continue, but I'd like to be assured that it will continue if approval is made at this point. I say right now that the school, church and council want a conversation about this going forward because this issue hasn't been properly addressed yet. Thank you.
Councillor Rook, you have 1 minute to respond.
I agree with what Mr. Mullins has said. I would like, or we, the parish council, would like to have an on-site conversation with Highways, if we may, to really show the problems as they are happening. I don't know at what times of day your surveys are carried out, but that road, especially the junction with Woodcock Lane and Everton Road, is a nightmare almost all of the day. So if we could have an on-site meeting and a conversation, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Chairman, thank you. Members, morning. Just to pick up on a couple of the points that the speakers have made in response, and I think a point made by Councillor Sleep as well in terms of the ongoing engagement between officers and the fact that the parish get a second bite later, I think is the phrase you used. I just need to be clear with you that if there's matters that need to be considered at this stage, so at outline planning stage, so your traffic impact, your traffic generation, your traffic mitigation that your highway officers have agreed with the applicant and have assessed the application and the transport detail in full, we need to deal with that now at the outline stage. So in terms of a second bite, if you grant plan permission today, your second bite is with regards to the reserved matters, the layout, the detail, the arrangement of buildings, parking provision, things that Councillor Wade mentioned. If it's going back to more fundamentals, such as maybe what the parish and the other speakers have just made reference to, I don't know that you can go back to that if you make a decision on this application. You've got technical advice from the highway officers. They're here in the room. They maybe have some opportunity to give you some further advice if you need it. But the traffic impact has been assessed. You have a no objection from your technical specialist consultee. I just need to put that marker down now and not give you any false hope that there's an opportunity for a second bite, to use that phrase again, because we need to deal with matters that outline now. You can't go back and deal with outline matters that should have been dealt with at outline when you get to your reserve matters.
I'll bring Councillor Sleep in again here.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just come back on that? All of the reassurance I was looking for when I talked about a second bite is the officer saying that if we do have parking issues, when we look at the layout, we might reduce the number of houses, and that's important. That's the sort of response I'm looking at, that can be discussed at a later time.
Absolutely, and that will absolutely be done. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And as a regular user of this lane myself, I want to see all of this resolved. But we now go back to the recommendation, which is delegated authority to be given to the service manager to reconsult Natural England on the appropriate assessment and have regard to their advice, and to grant permission subject to following conditions. That has been proposed by Councillor Cressell. And the 106 agreements. So that has been proposed by Councillor Cressell and seconded by Councillor Wade. All of those in favour, please raise your hand.
Chair.
I'm going to have a short break now before we move on to the next applications. If you can be back by 1:45 in the chamber, please. Thank you. Welcome back. We'll continue with the next application, which is land at former Fawley Power Station, Fawley. That's application number 24/11096. and you'll find that on page 97 of your agenda. We have Mr. Monachino Ayres. Have I pronounced that right?
It's Monachino, but that's
Oh,
fine.
Monachino, okay,
Most
fine.
people do.
Transport planning, and Councillor Alan Alvey has a representation to be read. Is that right? Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go on then with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one update before I go into the presentation. In the last 24 hours, we have received one further letter of objection from a local resident raising similar issues to those set out in the committee report. So, moving on to the presentation. The application before you is one of two applications on the former power station that you are being asked to consider today. This application seeks to use 1.75 hectares of land, as defined by this red line area, for storage uses falling under use class B8 and for a haulage use. The land in question is situated on the western boundary of the former power station site, close to its northwestern corner. The application has been submitted retrospectively, with temporary planning permission being sought until the end of this calendar year. This plan gives you more context to the site. You will see that the site is served by a long access road, which extends eastwards from the B3053 public highway. The land lies immediately adjacent to the New Forest National Park on its western side. You can see on this plan there is an area of woodland known as Chambers Copse immediately to the west of the site. You'll note to the south and east the outline of some large buildings. The large substation buildings to the east are still in situ, but you should note that the main power station building to the southeast is now demolished. This aerial photograph provides you with further context. You can see the long access road extending in from the west. The site itself is laid to hard standing and is flat. You can see that adjacent areas of the former power station are being used for the storage of wind turbine blades. You'll note the area of woodland to the west of the site that is within the national park, beyond which you can see the site of Fawley Quarry, which is being actively worked and which is also within the national park. Taking you through the submitted plans, the application plans, this is the site location plan. You'll note the site's proximity to Southampton Water to the east of the site. This is simply a zoomed in version of the location plan so that you can get a little bit of a clearer understanding of the site and its context. And then this is the applicant's submitted block plan. Now, at present, the land is occupied by 3 different users. The southernmost part of the site is occupied by Earlcote Construction, who store equipment, construction plant and equipment on the land. The middle part of the site is occupied by JHS, who are a haulage company that have apparently occupied the site for in excess of 7 years. They use the land to park their HGVs and trailers. Then the northernmost part of the site is occupied by ICS, who use the land for the storage of air conditioning and refrigeration equipment. So I'll now show you some photographs of the site and the 3 distinct uses that are taking place. This photograph is a view of the southern end of the site and shows the area of land being occupied by Earlcote Construction. You'll note the land has been enclosed by this palisade fence. Then this photo shows the inner parts of the Earlcote Construction storage area. You'll note there's a mix of containers on the land,
as well as construction related vehicles here. Then this next photograph is showing the central haulage use area occupied by JHS. You'll note their vehicles here parked and stored on the land. And then here we have a photo of the western edge of the haulage use area. You can see the wire fence boundary here with woodland beyond. Then here we've got another image of the haulage use area. This one is looking southwards. In the distance, you can see the electricity substation building and some stored wind turbine blades as well there. And here we've got some portable cabins that are being used by JHS for offices and welfare facilities. And then moving northwards, this is the part of the site that is being used by ICS for the storage of air conditioning and refrigeration equipment. And then here, another image of this northern storage area. In the background, you'll note the mature trees beyond the site boundary that are within the national park. Now, in considering this application, it's important to recognise that a permanent storage and haulage use would not accord with policy strategic site 4 of the local plan. This plan shows the concept master plan accompanying that policy, which indicates that the site should be redeveloped for a residential-led mixed-use development of 1,380 houses, up to 10,000 square metres of ancillary community, retail, leisure and service uses, and business uses falling within primarily the former use classes B1 and class B2 in the northern part of the site. However, following the withdrawal of the site redevelopment proposals in July 2024, it is considered that short-term temporary employment uses would be appropriate in principle and would deliver economic benefits in the short term, pending more permanent proposals for the site coming forward. Nevertheless, the impact of the proposed use on its surroundings needs to be acceptable and in accordance with policy ENV3 of the local plan. In this respect, there are 4 key impacts that I want to discuss briefly, which have been carefully considered by officers, namely transportation impacts, amenity impacts, landscape impacts, and ecological impacts. So firstly, with respect to transport impacts, both of the applications on the former power station site that you are being asked to consider this morning were supported by a joint transport statement, which considers the transport impacts of the proposed developments and in particular, how much traffic is being generated by the developments. Details of this are set out in the committee report. In respect of this site, it should be noted that the 2 storage uses are relatively low active uses, with each of the uses typically generating traffic movements just 2 or 3 times a week. The haulage use does generate a greater number of transportation movements, albeit that during the week, the majority of vehicles are out on the road delivering goods around the country. So vehicle movements from the haulage use are typically greatest on a Monday morning when vehicles leave the site, and then again on a Friday when vehicles return. The Highway Authority have carefully considered the number of traffic movements being generated by the development, and their conclusion is that the level of change is not significant and will have no material effect on the operation of the highway network, noting the temporary nature of the proposal. Officers can see no sound reason to disagree with the expert advice of the Highway Authority. Then in terms of amenity impacts, there has been an issue in the past year or so whereby early morning HGV movements in particular have been causing disturbance to a number of residents who live in close proximity to the B3053. The evidence suggests that the most significant source of this disturbance is HGV movements from JSH's vehicles, particularly on a Monday morning as they leave the site from 4 a.m. onwards. As a result of this impact, officers have considered whether hours of operation need to be controlled through condition. Having regard to the views of the Council's Environmental Health Officer, it is considered that allowing a continued 4 a.m. start on the site would cause undue harm to residential amenities, whereas allowing a later 6 a.m. start would strike an appropriate balance between the needs of the businesses and protecting residential amenities. It's also considered that there need to be some controls relating to weekend and evening use of the site to protect residential amenities. As such, provided hours of operation on the site are controlled as set out in condition 3 of the report, officers considered that the development would have an acceptable impact on residential amenities. Then, moving on to landscape impacts, the site is adjacent to the New Forest National Park, but due to screening beyond the site, it's not considered the development, in this case, would have a harmful landscape impact, subject to a condition controlling the height of stored items. And then finally, in terms of ecological impacts, this part of the site has limited ecological interest, and it is considered that the uses can continue to operate without harming those ecological interests. Summing up the application then, we have a proposal that is contrary to local plan policy. However, officers consider there is a reasonable justification to permit the proposed temporary use until the end of this year, given that the scheme's short-term economic benefits and given the proposals would not prejudice the long-term delivery of a sustainable and policy-compliant redevelopment in the longer term. Officers are satisfied that the continued operation of the proposed uses would not be materially harmful to highway safety, to residential amenities, to the special qualities of the adjacent New Forest National Park, or to ecological interests, subject to conditions restricting hours of operation and the height of stored items. So the recommendation before you is to grant temporary planning permission, subject to conditions, with that temporary planning permission to be until the end of this calendar year, i.e. 2025. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to our first speaker, Mr. Monachina Ayres, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Ian Monachino Ayres. I'm a director of IMA Transport Planning, speaking on behalf of the applicant. We prepared this transport statement that was submitted in support of both the temporary applications, sites A and B. The approach to assessing the impact of the proposal was slightly unusual in that the applications are retrospective and hence the site is already being used for the planning permission sought. This means that our approach was to survey traffic movements both on the site access and on the B3053 to the north of the site access to establish how much traffic the whole site was generating and its proportion of traffic on the B3053. We then, based on the development areas, estimated how much of this traffic was due to the areas for which planning permission was sought, which allows us to assess the impact of the proposed development areas on the highway network. The conclusion of our assessment was that the impact of the use of the areas for which permission is sought is negligible and would have no material effect on the operation of the highway network. Hampshire County Council, as highway authority, has considered our assessment and concluded there is no highway objection to the proposed development. I've also been asked by my client to address the recent representations made by Mr. Allen, a local resident, regarding the logging of movements by container vehicles over the weekend. They would like to advise the committee as follows. Regarding the current hours of operation undertaken by JHS, we fully acknowledge that these are incompatible with the proposed hours of use condition. If planning permission is granted, JHS would therefore be unable to continue operating in their current manner from the site. In reality, this means that they would probably end up having to vacate the site. There are breaks in the lease agreement with JHS which would allow us to terminate the lease in such circumstances. If JHS are unable to comply with the proposed hours of use condition, then they will be required to vacate the site. There are other operators on the site, in addition to JHS, who we also have to consider and have regard to, and wish to ensure that they have the opportunity to continue operating the site. We would not therefore want to jeopardise the prospect of temporary applications being granted due to the actions of just one operator. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we now have a letter to be read from Councillor Alvey. Thank you.
As ward councillor, I'd like to say a few words of context further to my objection to both these applications. The Fawley Waterside Development planning application was approved by this committee subject to signing the Section 106 agreement in July 2020. This planning application contained a number of conditions that had been agreed following extensive discussions with the local community. The community accepted the scheme, in some cases reluctantly, on the basis that the benefits of the scheme outweighed the negatives. Subsequently, it became clear by the end of 2023 that works that were subject to these two applications were being carried out on the site, not covered by the main application and without approval. Indeed, some of these unapproved activities have been carried out since the time of the original application in around 2018-2019. After I reported this an enforcement case was raised in February 2024. The District Council planners agreed with the developer that a retrospective planning application could be raised to try and regulise the situation. A year later, these are the applications before this committee. The major problem for residents is the increased noise from traffic on particularly the B3053. It is accepted by both the planning officer and the environmental health officer that this noise negatively impacts the community. The various traffic reports are difficult to compare, but another issue is the increase in traffic since 2019, which the road movements planned under the original scheme and agreed with Hampshire County Council were meant to address. If these two applications are accepted with the condition that the work can continue until the end of this year, it will mean that these unapproved activities will have continued for well over 2 years. I think this is unacceptable, and I believe that it is a mockery of the due processes and the inclusions within planning law of the rights to the community not to be negatively impacted. I ask this committee to take to action to stop the use of the site for these purposes as soon as possible.
Thank you. We did have declaration of interest. Was it Councillor Hartman? Yeah, if that's recorded. Thank you. Okay, questions then, please, either to officers or speakers. Councillor Wade.
Yes, Chairman, I've got a question for our planning officer. The haulage company requires an operating licence legally to exist and to operate. And part of the operating licence has to designate its operating base. It's got to be on their licence. That's a legal requirement. Now, this is retrospective planning permission, but to get an operator's licence and to get an operating centre, you have to have planning permission. So the question I want to ask our officers, are we about to ratify something that is illegal? Because if you have to have planning permission to have an operating centre, the operating centre has to be on the operator's licence. It's going to look it up. Right, this is true, because I've just checked it myself while we were going through this. How can we ratify something that isn't correct legally?
I'm not sure that I can fully answer the points, but what I can tell you, based on the application submissions, is that the agent for the application has confirmed that JHS do have the necessary operator's licence. In terms of the planning consideration, that really isn't a sort of consideration in terms of whether we sort of recommend temporary permission or not. Obviously, if temporary permission is granted, then the uses on that site would be lawful for the duration of the rest of this year. But they would need to operate in accordance with the conditions of the temporary permission.
Can I just come back to that? I understand what you've just said, but if it's illegal in the first place because it hasn't got planning permission, is it? I'm just looking for. Is it right that we're going to ratify something that was originally illegal. Perhaps our legal officer will add.
Well, if you grant planning permission today, it will have planning permission, which will regularise the position. Surely, how can granting planning permission cause the operator to be in breach of its operating licence? If it's in breach of the operating licence, it's in breach of it now, but it wouldn't be if you granted it planning permission.
Yeah, sorry, I totally understand that. But if someone's committed something wrong, we don't say we'll change the law, say it's right now.
Right, we're not here to make that judgment. We're here to look at what we've got in front of us and make a decision. Did somebody else have their hand up? Councillor Dowd.
Thank you. I just want to be clear about a couple of things, because we're considering the noise of the vehicles, and I think for a lot of people the noise of the vehicles might simply be the sound of the vehicles going along a road. But as we know, anyone who's lived near a building site and things like that, vehicles often have alarms when they're moving backwards, reversing, I think is the correct term for that. And, you know, to have that kind of sound going off at 4 o'clock in the morning is really very, very intrusive to people living by. If we're saying we're not happy about it happening at 4 o'clock, but we're happy for that sort of thing happening at 6 o'clock, I still think that's quite a consideration. Because when our conditions, when we have building sites, developments, we tend to say work shouldn't start till 8 o'clock, out of consideration for neighbours there. So I think to say we're happy for that sort of noise to happen at 6 o'clock is expecting quite an intrusion into the residents in the area. So I have considerable sympathy for people who are living within earshot, because the noise really does get on your wick when you're hearing it day in, day out. I'm also concerned about the traffic movements happening over what is, for the waterside, our rush hour time. And I appreciate the movements in themselves may not be great, 3% difference, but it adds up when you've got pressure on the roads already during rush hour times. Thank you.
Thank you. If I'm reading right, the movements aren't daily, are they? They're mostly on a Monday. Is that right?
In terms of JHS's movements, yes, there is a peak movement on a Monday morning, and they do start up at 4 a.m. on the morning. As I understand it, based on the application submissions, about 70% of JHS's vehicles are away during the week. There are movements on Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays, but it is less than on Mondays and then Fridays when most of the vehicles will return to the site.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Sleep next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, regarding the 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock situation, we're talking about a transport company, and those units have to be sited somewhere on site. If they're leaving at 4 o'clock in the morning, the drivers don't really want to be there at 4 o'clock in the morning, but they've got to be somewhere at 7 o'clock, I would imagine. Now, moving all the vehicles to a 6 o'clock time from a 4 o'clock time, I don't think necessarily would save anything. For the agent itself, the company, I would imagine they'd lose some contracts. So that's an issue that we need to think about on this. But, I mean, the vehicles themselves are leaving the sites when they have to get to somewhere as a unit for working. So that's the situation as I see it.
Councillor Crisell.
Could I just ask to clarify, didn't you say that if the timing was changed, they would have to finish the contract, and it wouldn't be viable?
That's not quite right. If they can't operate within that restriction, within the restricted hours of the condition, then obviously let's say they did operate outside contrary to the condition, then their contract would be terminated. But really, it's a decision for them. When you imply that condition, impose that condition, then they've got to decide whether they can actually work with that or not. If they can't, then they would have to find another base where they could travel at those times. And then that area would still be used for open storage, but someone else would come in that could actually operate within those hours, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. Can I ask one more question? Are we able to ask the officer to comment on the page 114, where Councillor Alvey suggests that the money for all the road improvements has been spent, and why has there been a failure to finish? Is he able to comment on that? 114.
So that comment was made in terms of the second application that you're being asked to consider today, not this application.
Sorry, I'll come back to that then.
Councillor Woods.
My concern from just being a resident, this site looks ideal to me for haulage. If this proposal isn't agreed, where are all those vehicles going to go, and are they going to cause just the same disturbance somewhere else? Well, what happens if the permission is refused?
I don't think that we can answer that.
Oh, right.
We just don't know.
Exactly.
We wouldn't know, would we?
Okay.
Councillor Riley.
Can the officer point out where the the properties are that are affected by this movement of traffic in the morning at 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever? There don't seem a lot of houses around there.
Yeah, it is set out on page 105 of the report, but just to clarify, this is the site, this is the main body of the site where the uses operate. This is some distance actually from residential properties. The nearest residential properties to the site itself are at Badminton Farm, and as set out in the report, there's no real concern with the use on the site itself, and because of its relative remoteness from residential properties. The issue is vehicles, in particular HGVs, who will leave the site, and obviously they go up here to the B3053, and they will pretty all go northwards. So it's vehicles that are close to the B3053 north of this point here. So you've got Stone Hills here and then Fawley Village, and the objections have primarily come from properties that live in close proximity to this stretch of the B3053, and their objections are based on the fact that they are experiencing noise disturbance, particularly on a Monday morning, also at other times, and that has increased significantly from what it was, say, sort of going back to 2023 and before.
What reason have you got for the traffic moving at 4 o'clock in the morning? Is there a reason it goes at the move at that time?
I think the answer is simply that it's a haulage firm, and so if they're hauling long distance, if they're picking up deliveries, etc., they need to move to other parts of the country. So I think it's purely just to do with, not that they have to go out necessarily sort of to get out the site or whatever, it's purely their business is, if it's longer distance haulage, you need more time on the road. And similarly, you'll find they tend to come back sort of Friday evening again when they've been out during the week.
And they're left there for the week. They're gone from Monday to Friday.
They're generally speaking gone from Monday to Friday. Yeah,
generally speaking,
they're off for the week. So there may be some movements in the week, but it's very low. So the main movement is out and then back.
And there's a possibility they could come back during the week for reason.
Yeah.
Could be you.
Some vehicles may, but the majority are out and then come back later. Come back at the end of the week.
I mean, this may seem like a silly question. Do they go out as a convoy or are they staggered?
I don't know is the answer. I mean, we know how many go out on an hourly basis, so they are spread over a couple of hours. So it's generally sort of from 4 o'clock through to 6 o'clock or so. You get sort of a movement then, and there'll be some after that.
Councillor Sleep.
Thank you, Chair. Going on to the parish town council comments, and they're pretty strong. They're concerned obviously about noise, but also children's safety at the schools and everything. And I noticed that there's 21, I think now 22 letters of objection. On the actual letters of objection, looking at some of the circumstances, have they been taken into account, and have they been discussed with the agents on site? You know, as regards the road traffic congestion, but more importantly, the damage on the local roads and the vehicle soil that's been dumped on the surfaces.
Yeah, the agent and the applicant have been carefully monitoring the representations that have been submitted, so they are well aware of the concerns that have been raised, and they have submitted a written response to try and address some of those concerns.
One more, Chair, sorry. So in the case circumstance of the parish, they're all complaining about it, and I understand that because they want to try and keep it quiet if they could do. But one of the qualifications on it is, however, a short-term temporary permission until the end of the year would deliver short-term economic benefits. Who are those economic benefits going to be benefited to? Because it's the locals that are complaining about the noise. Are they going to get, how does that financially help them?
Well, the short-term economic benefits are for the users of the site. So you've got the free users of the site that will deliver economic benefits for those free users.
Okay.
Sorry, did you hear that? I didn't have my mic on. We're in debate. Councillor Hartman.
Yeah, I'm the owner of Stonehill Farm. We're fairly close. Never have we been woken up at 4 a.m. with lorries reversing or an increase of traffic. I think a lot of confusion is the quarry just down the road as well. They've got a lot of movement. However, that road can take a lot of traffic. We have hundreds and hundreds of people going to the beach every day in the summer. A few extra lorries leaving in the morning. We've never, no one's come to me as a councillor, the local residents, to make a complaint. So I don't see a problem with that.
Don't farmers get up at 4 o'clock in the morning? Oh, right, okay. Right, Councillor Woods.
Going on from Councillor John Sleep's comments, the 21 letters of objection were over the 11 different topics. So it looks as if there may be only 1 or 2 letters for the particular topics, which just doesn't seem excessive to me.
Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. I know it was a bit of flippant, my earlier question, but I'm going to reiterate the point. That company is operating illegally. It is. Because I used to work in this business, so I know the rules very well. They're operating illegally, and one question, if they're operating illegally on something significant as that, one might question how their other operational activities are managed. The thing about road haulage, you're delivering to customers or you're picking up customers' time. I totally understand why you have to go early in the morning, because people want their stuff delivered at 7 o'clock in the morning, or 8 o'clock and so forth, and they have to go to vast distances. But it's all about commercialism, and the more your vehicles are running, carrying things to and fro, the more money they're making. So I don't believe they all go out on a Monday morning and don't come back till Friday. I find that a bit impossible to believe. The issue we've got to say, from a planning perspective, is that location the right place for an operation of this type? And historically, we had a power station there. And I don't suppose you heard the power station from the farm either. I don't know. But there wasn't a lot of noise down there. Now, the fact is that we have a commercial operation with, I don't know how many HGVs, it looks probably 20 or so. Right, there is going to be a significant impact to people that live perhaps a bit closer to the road than where you live. So I have sympathy for the parish council, even Councillor Alvey's point of view. But let's not forget, at the end of the day, this is always retrospective. This stuff's been going on for a long time without planning permission, and now we're catching up with them. And the question I want to ask is, what happens after December 25 and they don't go? Because they haven't worried about planning permission so far, and if they get planning permission till December 25, what happens if they don't go? We can enforce it.
Yes, there'll be a condition attached to the planning permission requiring them to cease operation as at presumably 31st December 2025. If they fail to do that, your recourse is to issue an enforcement notice. It has to be acknowledged they have the right to appeal that enforcement notice, and it could be several months before anything happens. What I would say is if you issued an enforcement notice today, it wouldn't take, if they appealed, it wouldn't take effect before 31st of December.
Yeah.
I'll
just come back to the office.
I think I would just add on that point as well, that they have every right to come back to us and submit a new application, say, sort of in the autumn or sort of close to when the permission expires, and seek to have a further temporary permission. That would not be unusual or unexpected, given the sort of the long-term nature of the developments that are affecting the site. I was just going to come back on one other point as well that Councillor Woods raised about the number of objections that have been raised, and that with 21 letters of objection and the bullet points that it's on almost, two letters of objection for each bullet point. That is not the way it works. And actually, when you look at those 21 letters of objection, most of those letters of objection are addressing the majority of those bullet points there.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything more to say? If not, we'll go to the vote, but I do need somebody to propose this, which is to grant, and somebody to second it.
I'll propose it, yes, based on, it is only a temporary planning permission, and I think it makes the situation better for residents with the condition, so I'd be happy to propose it.
Thank you. And the second?
Are we 4 o'clock start or 6 o'clock start?
Well, the condition is 6 o'clock start. Okay. Okay. I will now come, before we take the vote, I'll come back to the speaker and you have 1 minute to respond.
I think there's nothing I want to add. Thanks, Chair.
In that case, we'll go to the vote then. So the vote is to grant. That's been proposed by Councillor Richards and seconded by Councillor Riley. All of those in favour, please raise your hands. And that's to grant with the conditions.
9, okay.
And against? 2. So that's been granted. So we'll move on to the next one, which is same Fawley again. This is application 24/10861, and this is on page 111 of the agenda. Okay. Do you want to speak again on this one?
I'm happy not to, because I'll just say the same thing if you like.
All right,
But
then, okay.
I'll just be
It's
here
up
to
you.
answer any questions.
All right, okay, fine. We'll go ahead then with the presentation.
Okay, this application is the second of the 2 applications on the former Fawley Power Station site that you're being asked to consider today. This application seeks to use just over 9 hectares of land as defined by this red line area for storage uses falling under use class B8. The land in question covers much of the southwestern quarter of the former power station site, including the basement of the old turbine hall and ground level areas extending up to the site's boundary with the New Forest National Park. The application has been submitted retrospectively, with temporary planning permission being sought until the end of this calendar year. In terms of context, you can see again the site is served by the long access road that comes in from the west, from the B3053. The land in question lies immediately adjacent to the New Forest National Park on its western and southern sides, with there being a public footpath that runs fairly close to the site's southern boundary. Then this aerial photograph gives you further context. Again, you'll see the long access road coming in. The site itself is laid to hard standing and the ground level areas are flat, but as you will see from the photographs that I'll show you, the large basement of the now demolished turbine hall extends several metres below adjacent ground levels. You can see that the adjacent areas of the former power station site here and here are being used for the storage of wind turbine blades. You'll note again the site's proximity to Southampton water and protected coastal habitats, whilst to the west of the site, you'll note the active quarry workings within the national park. So I'll just take you quickly through the submitted application plans. This is the site location plan. Then this is a slightly more zoomed in version of that location plan. Just to note, many of the structures that are shown on this plan are now demolished. And then this is the applicant's submitted block plan. This area is the basement, turbine hall basement area. Now at present, the site is occupied by two different uses. The main user is SJG, a local company based in Marchwood, who import vans from China. Vans are brought into the site on containers before being stored on the ground level areas of the site until they are sold, at which point they are driven away. Some of the empty containers are then stored in the basement until being sold on. The second user, Snoozebox, have been renting the northwestern corner of the basement area since September 2023, where they store containers that are used as mobile accommodation units for large construction projects and events. Since the main delivery of the containers, their containers to the site, their use of the site has been very low key. So to show you some photographs so you get a clearer understanding of the site in its context, here we're looking from the south into the old turbine hall basement. You can get an idea of how deep the basement is. You'll note the containers that are being stored within the basement by SJG, and then you'll note on the left-hand side of the image here some of the vans that are being stored on the ground level areas outside of the basement. And then I think this image again shows more clearly, you can see the vans stored within the ground level areas above the basement, and here you can see the sort of the access, the sloping access into the basement from ground level. Then here we've moved to the north side of the turbine hall basement. We're looking into the basement clearly. You can see here some of the more recently delivered containers which the vans are brought in. Typically there's two vans within each container. And then further back you can see the containers where they are being stored, stacked up to up to 5 containers high, but they only project above the walls of the basement to a limited degree. Again, you'll notice the white van stored above above the hall. Now here we're looking at the storage use by Snoozebox. These are all the double stacked white containers here. The storage here, as I've mentioned, is relatively static. And then here we're looking into the basement from the western side. Again, you can see the white containers stored by Snoozebox, and then sort of beyond you can see the different coloured containers being stored by SJG, and again you'll notice the stored vans in the distance. So in terms of the ground level areas, just a couple of images here. This is on the east side of the turbine hall basement. Again, you see the line of stored vans. And then here we are down to the southern boundary of the site, adjacent to the National Park boundary. You can see the wire fence here, which marks the power station's boundary, beyond which is the National Park. And then one final photograph that I can show you is this aerial perspective, which gives you a sort of clear idea of all the activities at the former power station site. This is the turbine hall basement in the centre here, and then you can see the lines of parked vans on either side, and you can see some of the other activities, the wind turbine storage as well. As with the previous application, the permanent storage use would not accord with policy strategic site 4 of the local plan. Again, this is the concept master plan, and as I've said in the previous presentation, policy promotes this site for a residential-led mixed-use development of 1,380 houses, up to 10,000 square metres of ancillary community retail, leisure and service uses, and business uses, falling primarily within use classes B1 and B2 in the northern part of the site. And following the withdrawal of the redevelopment proposals last year, in July last year, as with the previous proposals, it's considered that a short-term temporary employment use would be appropriate in principle and would deliver economic benefits in the short term, pending more permanent uses coming forward. Now, as with the previous application, the proposal still needs to be acceptable in itself and in accordance with policy ENV3 of the local plan. And in this respect, there are 5 issues that I will go through briefly, namely transportation impacts, amenity impacts, landscape impacts, ecological impacts, and in this case, flood risk. So with respect to transport impacts, you've heard the advice on the previous application. Both applications were supported by the same transport statement, which considers how much transport impacts the uses generate. Details are set out in the committee report. Now, in respect of this site, the storage use by Snoozebox is a low activity use generating few traffic movements. The storage use being operated by SJG undoubtedly generates a greater number of transportation and movements. The planning statement submitted with the application indicates that SJG park their HGVs at Marchwood overnight, so only visit the site when delivering and collecting containers. Daily movements can vary depending on when a shipping consignment arrives in port. And then once sold, vans are typically driven off the site in batches, roughly of 5 to 10 at a time, but the agent has advised that this figure can go as high as 50. Now, the Highway Authority have carefully considered the number of traffic movements being generated by the development. Their conclusion is that the level of change is not significant and will have no material effect on the operation of the highway network, noting the temporary nature of the proposal. And again, officers can see no sound reason to disagree with the expert advice of the Highway Authority. Then moving on to amenity impacts, the most significant noise impacts in this case are within the turbine hall basement area, which due to its depth is quite an effective noise buffer. It's important to note that SJG only typically operate on the site between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. on Mondays to Fridays and do not operate on the site at weekends. Therefore, their use of the site should not be generating significant traffic movements beyond the site outside of these hours. The applicants have confirmed that they're agreeable to accepting a condition that restricts hours of operation to these current working hours, and in this way officers are satisfied that the use would not be materially harmful to the amenities of even nearby residential properties in our lane or properties further afield that are close to the B3053. Then, in terms of landscape impacts, and in particular impacts on the adjacent New Forest National Park, the parked vans are visible from public viewpoints within the adjacent national park, but in the short term, their visual impact and landscape impact is considered acceptable. However, in the short term, even in the short term, it is recognised that container storage would have the potential to have a more harmful impact on the national park. As such, this plan has been submitted to label the areas where container storage occurs to be conditioned. So the green area of this plan is the turbine hall basement, where stacked container storage is considered visually acceptable. The yellow area adjacent to the more open parts of the adjacent national park are areas where it is considered that no container storage should occur, whilst on the beige areas, single height container storage is deemed acceptable, and this is reflected in the conditions detailed within the committee report. Then, in terms of ecological impacts, a concern has been raised about the potential for bats to roost within some of the crevices of the turbine hall basement. On the basis that the application only seeks a short-term temporary planning permission, this impact is considered acceptable subject to condition 6 as detailed in the committee report. And then just finally to note that small parts of the site, and it is only small parts of the site, are within a defined flood risk area. Again, because the application only seeks a short-term temporary planning permission, the flood risk associated with the development is considered acceptable, subject to condition 7 as detailed in the committee report. Summing up, then, we have a proposal, as with the one you've just considered, that's contrary to local plan policy. However, officers consider that there is reasonable justification to permit the proposed temporary use until the end of this year, given the scheme's short-term economic benefits and given the proposal would not prejudice the long-term delivery of a sustainable and policy-compliant development in the longer term. Officers are satisfied that the continued operation of the proposed use would not be materially harmful to highway safety, to residential amenities, to the special qualities of the adjacent New Forest National Park, or to ecological interests, or indeed be harmful from a flood risk perspective, subject to conditions restricting hours of operation and the height and location of stored items. So the recommendation before you is to grant temporary planning permission, subject to conditions, with the temporary permission to be until the end of this year. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think you need to read Councillor Alves. You want to do it again? No. And you're happy not to say any more. So questions, and do you still have your question, Councillor Crozell? No? Councillor Sleep.
In Councillor Alves' defence, on one of his parts of this message, he's actually stated that while we have these vehicles parked on site, there was no reason, according to ABP, why they couldn't have been parked in the docks. There was access available for them. I'd just like to make that point.
That's not what's before us, is it? So does anybody else have any questions or anything to say? Any Councillor Crozell?
Well, I feel really assured that everything's temporary and even the bats won't mind. So when the plan comes back next time, we'll be able to say no because it won't be temporary anymore. So I'm happy.
Councillor Riley?
Yeah, in 2019, this was in the local plan, in the New Forest District local plan. In 2019, this site was granted planning permission. Well, interim planning permission. Why has it come now that it's been used as an industrial estate, no, a storage area?
No, I mean, there was a plan for housing which was withdrawn in 24, and this is making use of the site. Do you want to carry on? Do you want to?
Yeah. So what's the long-term aim of the new First District Council on this site?
So the policy is still strategic site 4, which I've outlined in the report, I've outlined in the presentation. So the policy is still promoting the site for a residential-led mixed-use development. We don't currently know what the long-term intentions for the site are, but in the short term, as set out in the report and the presentation, we feel that what's proposed will deliver economic benefits that are fully justified. Thank you.
So these companies can come back in 9 months or 10 months' time and reapply for planning permission, no, for interim, for planning on here. Will that be allowed?
They could certainly come back at the end of this year and apply to extend their time on the site. We would have to consider that on its merits at that time, based on policy and based on other material considerations.
Thank you.
Were there any more questions? And do we need to debate this? Exactly. So the recommendation is to grant. So I can come back to the speaker for a minute. No? Okay. So we need a proposer and a seconder. Are you proposing? Riley proposing and Richards. Okay, so Councillor Riley's proposing the recommendation. Councillor Richards is seconding it. So can we have a vote on grant temporary permission with the conditions? Do you want to say one? No, he doesn't want to. It's unanimous.
That is 11.
Yeah, unanimous, and that's been granted. Thank you all very much. We'll now move on to our next applicant. Sorry. Oh, yes, interest. We have Councillor Wade and Dowd. Okay. So this is application 24/11019, 47 High Street, Hythe. And you'll find this on page 127 of the agenda. No speakers on this one. We'll just go straight into the presentation.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman. Morning, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. This application is for 47 High Street in Hythe. We have two applications for this site, one after the other. They're retrospective applications. One is for advertisement consent for the signage above the shop, and the other one is for planning permission for the shopfront alterations. So as you see the red line plan here, 47 High Street, it's currently used as a barber shop. In the local context, you can see the Hythe High Street running through here. So it goes from the pier, so the historic pier, runs down the High Street, and around the corner down to the marsh is a pedestrian area. And there's lots of shops, etc. It's quite a vibrant centre with a weekly market, so it's well used. Here's an aerial photograph of the shop, of the site. You can see the waterfront to the north east, and to the rear they've got a parking area. Here we have the planning constraints. So all this in pink is the conservation area. So it's quite a wide area which covers the High Street and the Marsh and St John Street. And highlighted here are some of the listed buildings. So we've got number 23, which is currently used as a chip shop. We've got the public house. There's another unit opposite, and round the corner into the Marsh, this big unit on the corner is also a listed building. So when considering this, we consider the impact on the conservation area and also the setting of these listed buildings. And local policies and government guidance are looking to preserve and enhance this historic character with any new development. So we have a block plan here produced from the agent showing the frontage of the shop highlighted in red, which is where the signage is at this stage. You can see the signage here above the shop. We've got the shuttering underneath. That isn't considered under this advertisement consent. That would be under the next application. So this application, we're just dealing with the Hythe Barber Shop sign here, which is internally illuminated. It's a metal box sign, and each letter is obviously illuminated individually. And here's the floor plan showing the protrusion to the front of the security shutters and the sign. So we've got the first photograph here. You can see underneath there's a canopy which protrudes above the shops, and here we can see the signage which protrudes forward in a box sign, and obviously the shuttering is housed behind the signage. And again, here we see the frontage of the shop with the individual illuminated sign. A bit closer up, you can see the box housing of the shuttering and then the attached sign in front of it, and you can see how it protrudes forward. And from a wider angle, you can see the shops adjacent to it. So you've got Waitrose here and Morrison's Daily, and there is illumination underneath the canopy, which has been there for some time. It was probably built with the shops, which were constructed in the 1970s. So you can see the Waitrose sign is quite a simple sign here with no illumination apart from the canopy signing. Morrison's has a bit more underline highlighted with illumination in the canopy. And then you can see the Hythe Barber Shop in the corner. This is a wider street scene showing the conservation area. The simple signage with the historic character retained. We've had quite a few applications in this area for illuminated signage, which has been resisted, and it is contrary to the shopfront design guide using internally illuminated signs within this historic area. And here we go back to the shop frontage. This is one with the shutters down, which just gives you an idea of how it looks when the shutters are closed. And again, from a wider angle with the shutters closed. So the recommendation is for refusal. It's contrary view to the parish council. We feel it's a large illuminated box sign which is detrimental to the street scene and harmful to the conservation area by reason of its excessive size, bulk, materials and internal illumination. It's non-traditional, unsympathetic and a garish appearance which fails to preserve the character and appearance of this conservation area, an adverse impact on the setting of nearby listed buildings, contrary to local policies, supplementary documents and government guidance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I say, we have no speakers on this one. So we'll take the first one first, the advertisement sign. Do you have any questions? Councillor Wade.
A question. You went back to the Morrison's sign. That's not illuminated. They want the shop next door. I'm sorry,
You can see the strip lighting here, and there's a strip light here and a strip light here. which provides illumination for
There's
those
no
shops.
illumination behind the sign
No,
itself. from what
no,
it
you
says.
can
Okay,
see here
I
it's
can't
just
remember.
stuck on plastic lettering, which doesn't need advertisement consent if it's not illuminated.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hartman.
Can they not just turn the lights off? Because it, you know.
In theory, then yes, they probably could, because it wouldn't require advertisement consent if it's not illuminated, providing they agree to keep it non-illuminated.
Any more questions? Councillor Sleep.
Well, we've got 22 barber shops in Tottenham. Some very much like this. And there seems to have been a truckload of the circular red and white spiral Gubbinses that work outside. Does that one actually operate? Is that lit as well? I noticed that. So it doesn't actually operate. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? We're going to debate. Does anybody have anything to say? Councillor Crizell.
I just feel very sad that that whole row looks very modern, Maitros, Morrison's, and the whole row looks very modern. When you look across the road, it does look very much more Hythe related. I think it's too late to stop this now. I hate signs, I hate illuminated signs, but I just feel it would be unfair now to stop that when the whole row looks like the same. Anyway.
All I can say is that they're not all internally illuminated box signs. It's very boxy, and if you see it from the side, it does protrude quite forward, about 50 centimetres in total. But it is, I mean, it's a 1970s building, appreciate that, but we are trying to resist the illumination on other units within that area.
Thank you. We are in debate. Councillor Dowd.
Yes, I think what probably hasn't been highlighted enough is that, of course, Hythe and Dibden has a neighbourhood plan, and some of the developments happened before the neighbourhood plan was in place. This is a conservation area. It is highlighted in the neighbourhood plan, and the idea of a neighbourhood plan is to stop this encroachment of things that don't really fit in that area. I think I would say that, you know, these kind of illuminated signs, the kind of light they project, is jarring to the to the surroundings, and it doesn't add to the area. It's a seating area around there as well, which is well used in the evening. So I would hope that this council respects the neighbourhood plan of the towns and parishes that have gone to the trouble of consulting widely in the community for their views on this. It doesn't fit with the neighbourhood plan, and I would hope that the recommendation is followed in this case. Thank you.
Are you proposing it?
I certainly am, yes.
Councillor Sleep.
Yeah, can I just say, Chair, contrary to Councillor Dade's comments, what confused me about this is I agree with the garishness of the sign, but Parish Council recommend permission. So, probably taking into Councillor Crisell's comments, in that block, it's not as garish as it could be, but taking also into account that you establish a precedent in the community, and it makes it more difficult for the officers to try and support the fact that we don't want that kind of lighting in the rest of the town. So I can understand the debate that's going on about it.
I would say, looking at the side, it is pretty well lit up anyway. Whether you want some more lights, but I don't think so.
Oh, Chairman, the point really about this is precedent, because whatever you think about that sign, we hate it, it's against the plan. And if we allow that one, then people could put them on the older buildings. So we have no choice but to want to refuse it.
You want to second it? You want to second the proposal by Councillor Dowd?
Why not?
Does anybody else have anything to say? In that case, we'll go straight to the vote. So the recommendation is to refuse. This has been proposed by Councillor Dowd and seconded by Councillor Wade. All of those in favour, please raise your hand.
Ten, Chair.
That's been refused, and so we'll go on to now the shutters. I don't think there's anything more to say, really. You've covered it all. Is there anything more you want to say?
I'll go through these quite rapidly because we've covered this. So I just want to go through to the photographs of the shutters when they're closed. I mean, basically it's a corner position and it does give a semi-industrial appearance, which is out of keeping in this location, these metal shutters in black. It is contrary to the shopfront design guide, which states that gaunt and unattractive shuttering which could create a hostile environment if replicated, and it obscures views into the shops, which with a blank frontage, which gives you a loss of vitality and traditional character of the area. So again, the recommendation is to refuse the shuttering because of its unsympathetic to its environment, the street scene, conservation area, etc. as before. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Councillor Sleep.
Can I just ask the officer, if the elevated box, the 500 deep box on the top, are we looking at the blind actually installed in that as well? Yes. So the box, we get rid of the box, the blind's got to go.
Both go really.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cresswell.
Can I just ask, does that mean that those shops now can't have shutters, even if they're subject to vandalism or whatever in that area?
They would need consent to have shutters. They'd need shop front.
I mean, shutters are shutters. Can you get glamorous shutters?
I don't think we would be looking for any shutters in this area, quite honestly. I mean, I think this sort of reduces the vitality of the area. They could have potentially internally, I think there is some which would be internal alterations which wouldn't require them.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
I understand why there's a little bit of concern about it, but we have to be fair on the businesses. They need to protect their assets. And if we say you can't put shutters, and unfortunately we have a lot of antisocial behaviour, somebody goes in there and rips all their stock out, they can't continue working until they spent out and repaired this and they start all over again. I think we should back those businesses. We don't want the businesses to go because we've become a ghost town. So I think we need to support them.
It's a conservation area. That's the point.
It doesn't matter. It's part of looking after our businesses. You know, we need businesses.
I just wondered if the business had given any justification why they needed the shutters. I mean, is there any evidence that there is a particular problem with vandalism or theft or whatever?
I haven't been given any justification or a public benefit from the shutters at all. I haven't heard that there's been any trouble in this location.
Councillor Hartman.
Yeah, Morrison's next door. I'm 99% sure they've got the shutters inside the shop when you go there late at night. So maybe that's something they could do, if that's allowed.
Does anybody else have anything to say? Councillor Penny.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to point out the fact that if we allow shutters on one, and probably everybody wants shutters, and then our antisocial behaviour culprits will probably take to their art skills, and we will end up with an area that's sprayed in their choice of art. Thank you.
Councillor Dowd.
It's the debate stage now. Well, I think I have slightly more sympathy for this one than the previous application, because there has been a certain amount of antisocial behaviour in the area, but other storeholders have dealt with the problem by having internal shutters, and I think that is an option in this area. And had the planning process being done in the right way with consultation with the officers and doing it, with due procedure. That would have been pointed out, and this could have been avoided. It isn't right for the area. I have every sympathy for all the shop owners in the area who've experienced intermittent vandalism and poor behaviour, but there are solutions that are more in keeping with the neighbourhood plan and with our local plan regarding conservation areas. Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything to say? Councillor Sleep.
Yes, Chair, just to say that I'm going to go back to Totton now and check every one of the 22 shops to see if they got planning permission for this, because the same kit is outside their shops.
Right, I think that's it. We'll bring the debate to an end. So I do need somebody to propose. The recommendation is to refuse. I need a proposer and a seconder, please. Councillor Dowd, are you proposing? Yes. And seconding? Councillor Penny. So recommendation to refuse, proposed by Councillor Dowd and seconded by Councillor Penny. All of those in favour, please raise your hands.
Eight, Chair.
Against? 1. Abstentions? 2. That has been refused. Thank you. The next application is application 24/10689, 2 Cranbrook Cottages, Southampton Road, Hyde. You'll find this on page 140. Yeah, sorry, I'll come back. 143 on your agenda, and we have 2 interests on this one. Councillor Wade and Councillor Dowd. Okay. We also have 1 speaker. Mrs. Christine Lord, so we'll come back to you after the presentation. If you can go ahead, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the application in front of us today is for the development of a new dwelling in the back garden of an existing property at 2 Cranbrook Cottages. You can see our application site there. Sort of wraps around the rear of the conjoined property at 1 Cranbrook Cottages. This is the wider site area. You can see here we are off the main Southampton Road thoroughfare, so we're not on the main thoroughfare. We'll have a look at some of the site satellite photos in a second, but we're off there in a more sort of residential part of the district here. So just to zoom into the site a bit more, you can see here, this is the main Southampton Road frontage, where we're set back from that by this area of green space, coming off this access road here into Alexandra Road and Alexandra Close up here. Just while we have this slide in front of us, I just want to talk a bit about the layout of the area and flag a couple of things up for your attention. So you can see here we've got sort of properties set back from this building line. And also there's quite a spacious character in terms of, we've got sight lines, the fence drops down here, so you've got sites across these rear gardens here. We will look in a bit more later on at some of the site photos, but there's an existing access here, which provides access to a couple of different outbuildings in this existing open garden area. While I've got this slide up, I will talk about one of the key issues on the scheme, which is that there is a culverted river that runs in proximity to the site, resulting in this, basically a strip here, all being designated as flood zone 3. As laid out in more detail in the report, flood zone 3 itself is split into two categories, 3A and 3B. For the reasons outlined in the report, we've taken the position that we're currently designating this site as flood zone 3B, which is the highest rating of potential flood zone risk. Normally speaking, this would have to be sort of clarified and mitigated as part of a flood risk statement, but the flood risk position hasn't really touched on that, so we've allocated it as being designated in flood zone 3B. In conjunction with the Environment Agency, generally speaking, development in flood zone 3B, particularly of this type, where it is a vulnerable type of development for flood zone risk, is deemed to be unacceptable. So that is one of the key reasons for refusal, and that's sort of laid out in more details in the report, and I'm happy to go into a bit more detail if there's any further questions on that. So in terms of the actual proposed development itself, we are looking to fit in a bungalow, a single-storey property in the property here, with a garden sort of running to the side of the property here. You can see the relationship with the dwelling to the rear there, and then it projects forwards to the front of the site. So to have a look, you can see those existing outbuildings here, which we've got some site photos of those in a few seconds. And this is the proposed layout. So in addition to the potential concern about the flood zones, we did also have some concerns about the potential layout of the development and how it integrates with the surrounding character and appearance of the area. As you would have seen from the high-level photos earlier, there was a quite substantial setback that was characteristic of this area. And then also there was quite large gardens generally as well. And the concern was that the infill development here felt quite cramped in the plot. We'll have a look at the elevations in a second and you can see how that would look in the street scene. So that's just to give you an idea of the layout and the subdivision of the existing plot and how that would work. We'll go on in a second. So this is the front of the property, the one on the left. That's what you would see as you were walking down the street scene. And this is the how the property would look fronting onto the open space area to the side, the garden. And then this is how it would look from the other elevations. Concern was also raised, so this is just the internal floor plan you can see there. Concern was also raised by one of the neighbouring properties, so this property here. They have two side-facing windows, one of which you can see there from the dormer window and one at ground floor level. Both of those windows are bathroom windows, so the assessment that we made was that we didn't think that relationship was harmful, although we did obviously retain concerns about the visual characteristics and appearance of the street scene. So this is the existing property here, and then looking down into Alexandra Road and Alexandra Close. This is the look into that property, and you can see the side additional side ground floor window there. So for the reasons we've laid out, there are three key issues. The first one is the flood risk. We don't think a residential development, a new residential property is appropriate in an area of flood risk. The second is concerns about the character and appearance in the surrounding area. We feel that development represents a cramped form of development that doesn't reflect the existing pattern of the street scene. And the final issue is there is a noted impact on sensitive habitats within the wider New Forest and Solent area of new residential accommodation. So a mitigation requirement would be required, which would be resolved by a legal agreement, which hasn't currently been provided. So for these three reasons, we are recommending that the application be refused. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll come to you, Mrs. Christina Lord. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Dear Planning Committee, many thanks in permitting us to be involved in the final part of the process of the planning review of our application. We wanted to provide background information for our application to the Planning Committee. Reasons for our application. We have lived in our current house for 22 years. We very much love this location, having this excessive garden plot. We wanted to build a small retirement bungalow for ourselves in retirement. Several properties in our location have already had garden developments very successfully. The beginning of the process was to engage a builder who had already built a new build just a few homes up from our property, Mike Fiddler. Mike provided advice on elevating the plot and size of the property type suitable in this area. Addressing the flood risk was the first issue to be addressed. The location of the flood risk area, due to the small culvert located in the neighbouring property, runs under the newly developed detached house at the bottom of our property, as you can see there. These concerns needed to be addressed to remove any flood risk from our new build. After 2 years of discussion with all external agencies, we were able to obtain confirmation from the liability of the flood risk by the environmental agency to the local Member of Parliament, Sir Julian Lewis, and defined by the Director of the Environmental Agency. This stated that all flood risks from the culvert is managed and enforced by the Environmental Agency, and as property owners we have no responsibility for the regard of this. Once this flood concern was elevated, pre-planning permission to the New Forest District Council was requested with very little response other than rejection, with communications on properties within Southampton City, not Southampton Road, Hythe, regarding flood risk properties. In a bid to move this forward, after several months, we decided to implement a full planning application. This was submitted in August 2024, and after providing all the requested documents, this was accepted on portal planning application in September 24, with consultation closure at the beginning of November 2024. The consultation expired at the beginning of November and no issues were identified. After the consultations expired, several additional submissions to include letters and refusal from Malcolm Wade and others, discussions with no objections with our neighbours. An objection was submitted after this person left the country, submitted on behalf by her daughter. We addressed the comments and statements of all interested parties and completed a flood risk assessment and implemented changes to the building specifications. The concerns of not being in keeping with surrounding location, a review of all the houses identified that the only constant thing identifying is the inconsistency of properties around this location. The comments on, if approved, is
George,
granted.
you've had well over 3 minutes.
Sorry.
Can you just sum up?
I completely understand and agree all the planning must comply to protect all. Once approval is provided, the land will be segregated with land registry and will engage a builder to build a new dwelling. Sorry, I didn't know this. I had my 3 minutes.
Thank you. Right, members, do you have questions, please, for the speaker or officer? Thank you.
I do apologise. I didn't quite. I'm Malcolm Wade. You did quote me. Could you just repeat what I said or done, please? Because I didn't.
We actually put something on the porthole about it not being in keeping with the surrounding areas, and that the houses were
I think that was Alex.
Yeah,
Alex.
yeah, and that the garden would be too small.
That was Alex Wade, not me.
I'm sorry.
Councillor Sleep.
Could I just ask the officer to go back to the aerial view and show the route of this river culvert, please? I'd be interested to see where it's supposed to be going. So it's culverted at the moment?
Yeah, so it runs down this side of the site.
Along the back of the red lined area. So it's through that, it's, what is it, a 12-inch pipe or something buried underneath it?
I don't know the specifics, is the short answer.
But you've listed it as a culvert and as a flood risk if it went, okay.
Councillor Wade.
What it is, that culvert that is running takes all the highway runoff water from the top of Hythe, because that's obviously higher, and it goes down one central culvert that goes all the way down to the promenade, where there is a double thingy to let water out but not let water in, and it's the main drainage point for the whole area.
Any more questions? Then we'll go into debate. Does anybody have anything to say? Councillor Riley.
Well, I think it's overdevelopment again, isn't it? It's a pretty small site for two houses. And I've got concerns with the culvert as well, so I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yes, it's typical backland development as far as I'm concerned, and I think if we start to build in our gardens, we're going to take away all the greenery, and it's shouldn't be allowed.
Does anybody else have any opinion? Councillor Sleep.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to say once again, we do like to look at parish comments, and once again, they've recommended permission. So there's a contradiction between our officers. It could be that this flood issue is not something they considered seriously enough, and it is, as far as our officers are concerned, it is. So that's probably explains some of that.
Councillor Wade.
To answer your question, they have been dealing with a problem like this for some time, I have. But the other problem we have with this road, of course, there's also a highway drain that runs along Alexander Road and Redondo Close. I think that the applicant mentioned it. That floods on a regular basis. Soon we have a lot of rain, it floods in that whole section, and we continue having to get it brought in. It is there is a flood issue there.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to say? Right. The recommendation is to refuse. I will need. Did somebody say something? I will come back. The recommendation is to refuse, so I will need somebody to propose and somebody to second this. Councillor Riley, you're proposing? You have 1 minute to respond.
Sorry, with regards to the culvert, it actually isn't in our property. It's not in our property. It doesn't flood our gardens. We've never been flooded. In the 22 years, 23 actually in May, that we've lived there, our property has never been flooded. So the culvert actually runs underneath the bungalow that overlooks our garden. The culvert runs underneath it. So they've elevated that, which is what we have proposed, that we elevate it. I can't understand why a culvert that isn't ours, and even Julian Lewis actually looked into this with the Environmental Agency, is still being brought up. It's not in our garden. It doesn't flood our garden. It doesn't flood. It's a little stream. It doesn't flood.
Okay. There are 3 reasons for refusal, as you can see in your papers. So we'll go back then to the recommendation, which is to refuse, and that's been proposed by Councillor Riley and seconded by Councillor Richards. All of those that support that, can they please raise their hands? Six. Those against? 1. Those that abstained? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 abstentions. So that has been refused. Okay, sorry. Thank you.
That's 12 people.
Can you put your hands up again for the abstentions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those 4, those that are voting to refuse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Adds up?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
So that has been refused. Thank you.
So how do I go about then actually
Okay, we're going on now to the last application. This is Avonmead, 16 Salisbury Road, Ringwood. Page 157 on the agenda. Application 24/11060. And we have councillors Mary Debuse and Gareth Debuse from Ringwood Town Council. Are you going to speak between you or just the one? Okay, we'll go to the presentation first then. Thank you.
Good morning or afternoon. So this application is in Ringwood. You can see here by the site location plan that it's off of the roundabout and it's on the road that leads to Fordingbridge. This road here is the A31 slip road. The property is 16 Salisbury Road. It forms part of a semi-detached property with a long garden and a existing garage to the rear. This part of the plan is full of trees. I would imagine that is to soften the blow of the slip road to the rear. This is the context plan, so you can see here that the slip road and the A31 is quite a major part of this proposal, with the main road to Fordingbridge on the other side. This is the aerial photograph, and this demonstrates the amount of trees to the rear and the greenery on the plot that's there already. That's just another site location plan. This is the block plan. This shows the position of the existing detached garage. These are the existing plans of the garage. So this just shows you an ordinary garage with open bay on the left-hand side here and here. And this one's covered in is already first floor storage, and you have two roof lights to the rear. This faces the A31 slip road. This is the proposed plan. So the actual form of the garage stays the same. The height is the same. The roof lights to the rear are the same. They're going to put a porch canopy to the front and block in this side and front elevations. The proposal is for an annex for occasional use for a blended family that are mainly at college and living away. This is the front of the property. It's actually shown, highlighted in the Ringwood local distinctiveness. it is a lovely looking property with tile hanging, you can see here, and in its elevated position, although you're driving through, you do notice it. It is a nice looking property. This is to the side is a separate entrance. This is because it is close to a busy road. You want to get off of that road and then go to the parking, and they have enclosed their rear garden. This is all pre the application. And you can see here there's ample parking in front of the garage, and that's what it looks like. There are trees on the site. Nothing needs to be pruned or removed in order to accommodate the proposals. And also you can see that because of the trees, there won't be any neighbour issues at all. And to the rear, like I said before, is the A31 slip road. This is the area to the front of the garage. So you've got the front of the garage on the right of the screen, and on the left is the formal rear garden. And this is, you can see there, there's shaded patches. There's ample parking for 3-4 cars. And this is the enclosed rear garden space. And as you can see, this is quite narrow, so you just drive straight from the road. All cars will be parked here for both the house and the annex. And that's the rear of the property. I recommend grant subject to conditions.
Thank you very much. Councillor de Boos, you have 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Ringwood Town Council is happy to retract its objection to this application and indeed agree with the applicant's representative that compliance to Development Plan Policy R10 is not required if the approval of this application does not lead to the building being used as separate living accommodation. So the question that the Town Council has on this application is this: will the conversion end up as a separate dwelling, and therefore will there be a material change of use? In legal terms, there is a difference between incidental and auxiliary in this regard. Incidental does not require planning permission. For example, if the building was already being used as living accommodation separate to the main dwelling, then planning permission would not be required. However, this application specifically notes that it is auxiliary. It is not currently a separate dwelling, but if this application is approved, its future could be as, for example, a granny annex. If I may quote Kingsley Smith solicitors, in one important case, a garage detached from a house was converted into a granny annex. The judge said that even if the accommodation provided a certain degree of independence, the annex did not, as a result, become a separate planning unit from the main dwelling. The living accommodation would remain part of the same planning unit with the house so long as it remained in single-family occupation. I'll repeat that. It remained in single-family occupation. If it is to be used as separate accommodation, a separate dwelling, an Airbnb or some such, then the requirements of Development Plan Policy R10 would apply. This is easy to do, a simple SAP calculation to show that the space heating demand will be less than 15 kilowatt hours per metre square per year. This costs a few £100 and actually is part of the building regs requirement for a SAP at some point anyway. If it isn't used as separate accommodation but is only for use by granny or some other family member, then conditions should be added, we believe, to ensure that it doesn't become a separate dwelling later without permission. Officers, particularly those in legal, are better placed than the Town Council to recommend such conditions. However, they could include, I've got 3, the annex can only be used by family members for overnight accommodation. The main dwelling and annex cannot be subsequently used as an HMO. and no separate utility provisions are incorporated in the annex. As stated, it would be wise to have a specialist in planning law advise members and planning officers on the appropriate conditions, as this area of planning law is not for the faint-hearted. But perhaps Nigel here can help.
Thank you very much. Sorry, you've had your 3 minutes. Have you got much more to say?
No, I'm just going to say, if this committee agrees that appropriate conditions must be added to prevent the garage from being used in separate dwelling, then the town council would be perfectly happy.
Thank you. I think probably everybody else shares your concerns regarding this. As far as an HMO is concerned, that would definitely have to be a planning application, but perhaps you can comment. Nigel, do you want to comment on the rest?
Well, only to say the most common condition in my experience to be added, if you're talking about an annex, is one that simply says it will not be used independently of the overall use of the main dwelling house. It's quite easy to construct such a condition. I don't know whether the officer's intention is to have such a condition in this case.
Chairman, if I can, given that your legal advice has just said, sort of almost batted it back to us in terms of whether officers think it's appropriate. Page 158 of your report, sorry, not 158, I'm going to go to different paragraph, apologies. 159, apologies. There's narrative in your report about the proposed use. Third paragraph down, we've dealt with the concerns about the town council's representations where they had commented about it being occupied as a separate dwelling. And you've had comments from the town council this afternoon as well. To my mind, the application site stays as one single planning unit as a result of the change to this building. It's not being subdivided. It's a building that's proposed to be ancillary to the main house. And therefore, as per that third paragraph under the proposed change of use, it's my advice to you that any further change, material change, would need a planning permission. Therefore, when you think about the 6 tests that are necessary, relevant, enforceable, precise, reasonable, the test for a planning condition, I'd suggest that it's unnecessary and probably unreasonable to add a condition on if that future use would require an express planning permission from you in its own right. So the advice you've had is right. You could draft a planning condition. It's wholly within your gift if you want to add a condition. But my advice to you, the officer advice is you don't need a condition in this case because what's being proposed is something that remains wholly ancillary.
Okay, any more questions? Thank you. Councillor Sleep.
Yes, if I could just have a question for the officer. This garage, which is the footprint we're operating on, so they're just modified. Is it single skinned construction? Well, if we're going to live in it, we need to...
Those changes would have to all the changes would be building regulations.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Then we're going to debate. Does anybody have anything to say? Nobody? Okay. Well, the recommendation is to grant, subject to conditions. We've taken on board things that have been said by the Ringwood Town Council, and you've been told by the officers how that will affect the application. So I need, if we're happy to go ahead with the vote, I need a proposer and a seconder. Proposed, Councillor Wade then. Recommendation to accept proposed by Councillor Wade, seconded by Councillor Dowd. All of those in favour, please raise your hands. Oh, sorry. I need to come back to you. Sorry, 1 minute.
So officers have indicated on a previous application that members may remember that conditions could not be applied to prevent study rooms being used as bedrooms. We've been advised by a planning consultant that this advice was not completely accurate.
In light of this, we would kindly ask that the decision is deferred until officers and legal have had time to fully confer on the potential conditions that could be applied to this application.
Thank you. They're totally two different scenarios, really, aren't they? I don't think we can make comparisons with that, but we'll go back to the recommendation anyway. And again, it was proposed by Councillor Way, seconded by Councillor Dowd to accept the recommendation, which was to grant. All of those in favour? Sorry? Yes, subject. Well, we're not putting the condition, we're not adding a condition, are we? Only what's here. We're not adding...
Only the conditions in the
Yeah, just what's there, yeah. Okay, all of those in favour, please raise your hands. That's unanimous.
11.
That's unanimous. Okay, that has been granted then. Thank you very much. That concludes the meeting for today. Thank you all very much.